The afternoon sun burned Jack's back. It was a hot day in the port of Oak Haven. The air was heavy and smelled of salt, dead fish, and wet wood. Jack lifted a large wooden crate from the ground. It was very heavy, but Jack was strong. He was 20 years old, tall, and had broad shoulders. His hands were rough from years of hard work. Jack walked up the wooden ramp to a large merchant ship. He carried the crate on his shoulder. Sweat ran down his face. He placed the box on the deck of the ship. "Hey, you! Move faster!" A man shouted. It was Mr. Grin, the foreman. Mr. Grin was a short, fat man with a red face. He stood in the shade and watched the workers. He never carried boxes. He only shouted, "I'm moving, sir." Jack said quietly. He did not look at Mr. Grin. He hated the foreman, but he needed the money. Jack walked back down to the dock. He looked at the sea. The water was blue and endless. Far away, he saw white sails on the horizon. Those ships were free. They went to strange lands and new islands. Jack wanted to be on one of them. He felt like a bird in a cage here. He was born in Oak Haven, and he worked in Oak Haven every day. One day, Jack whispered to himself, "One day I will leave this place." He picked up another crate. This one was full of iron tools. It was heavier than the last one. Jack's muscles burned, but he did not complain. He focused on the rhythm of the work. Lift, walk, drop. Lift, walk, drop. The sun began to go down. The sky turned orange and purple. The seagulls flew home. Finally, a loud bell rang across the port. It was the signal. The workday was over. The other workers dropped their boxes and sat down. They were tired and dirty. Mr. Grin clapped his hands. "All right, that is enough." Mr. Grin said, "Come back tomorrow at sunrise. And don't be late." Jack wiped his face with a dirty cloth. He was exhausted. His back hurt, and his throat was dry. He needed a drink and some food. He put on his old coat and walked away from the ships. The streets of Oak Haven were dark and crowded. Sailors from all over the world walked on the cobblestones. They sang songs and laughed. Jack walked toward the Rusty Anchor. It was a small, dark tavern near the water. It was not a nice place, but the ale was cheap. Jack pushed the heavy wooden door open and walked inside. The Rusty Anchor was full of smoke and noise. Sailors sat at round wooden tables. They drank ale, ate meat, and told loud stories about the sea. The air smelled of tobacco and roasted chicken. A fire burned in the fireplace, but the room was still dark. Jack walked to the bar. The barman, a bald man with a big mustache, nodded at him. "The usual, Jack?" The barman asked. "Yes, please." Jack answered. He put 2 copper coins on the counter. The barman gave him a wooden mug of cold ale. Jack took his drink and looked for a place to sit. He did not want to talk to anyone. He was too tired. He found a small empty table in the back corner of the room. It was away from the fire and the loud groups of sailors. Jack sat down and took a long drink. The cold ale felt good after the hot day in the sun. He watched the people in the tavern. There were men from the north with big beards, and men from the south with gold rings in their ears. Suddenly, the door opened. A gust of wind blew into the room. A strange old man walked in. The man wore a long, grey coat with a hood. The hood covered his face. He walked quickly, looking left and right. He seemed nervous. His hands shook as he held his coat close to his body. The old man looked around the room. His eyes met Jack's eyes. Jack looked away, but the old man walked straight toward him. "Is this seat free?" the stranger asked. His voice was rough and low. Jack was surprised. There were other empty tables. I suppose so, Jack said. The old man sat down heavily. He pulled back his hood slightly. Jack saw his face. It was a map of wrinkles. He had a long white scar across his left cheek. His eyes were grey and wide with fear. My name is Elias, the old man whispered. He did not look at Jack. He looked at the door. I need a friend tonight. I do not have much time. Jack frowned. I'm just a dock worker, old man. I cannot help you. I have no money. I do not need money, Elias said. He leaned across the table. His voice was urgent. I need someone brave. I saw you on the docks today. You are strong. I saw how you carry the crates. Jack put his mug down. Why were you watching me? Because I am being hunted, Elias said. His hand trembled on the table. Bad men are coming. They want what I have. They will be here soon. Jack felt a cold chill. This was not a normal evening. The noise of the tavern seemed to fade away. He looked at the old man's fearful eyes. Who is coming? Jack asked. Elias looked at the door again. Pirates, he whispered. The worst kind. Pirates, Jack repeated. He looked at the wooden door of the tavern. It was closed, but he felt unsafe. Why do pirates want you? You are just an old man. Elias did not answer immediately. He reached deep into his grey coat. His hand moved slowly and carefully. He pulled out a small, flat object. It was wrapped in dark, oily cloth and tied with a piece of rough string. It looked very old and dirty. They want this, Elias whispered. He placed his hand over the object on the table. He did not let go of it. What is it? Jack asked. He leaned forward. He was curious now. It is a map, Elias said. His voice was so low that Jack could hardly hear him. But it is not a normal map. It shows the way to the golden compass of the East. Jack sat back in his chair. He frowned. The golden compass. That is a children's story. My mother told me that story. It is a legend about a magic treasure. It is not real. It is real, Elias said firmly. His grey eyes were serious and intense. I saw it once, many years ago, and I stole this map from the man who wants it most, Captain Iron Hand. Jack froze. Everyone in Oak Haven knew the name Iron Hand. He was a cruel pirate captain. People said he killed men for fun. If Iron Hand was chasing Elias, the old man was in terrible danger. I cannot help you, Jack said. He started to stand up. I do not want trouble with Iron Hand. Sit down, Elias hissed. He grabbed Jack's wrist. The old man was surprisingly strong. It is too late. They know I am in the city. They will find me. Elias pushed the wrapped packet across the table. Take it. No, Jack said. You must. Elias begged. I am old. I cannot run anymore. But you are young and strong. You can escape. Keep it safe. Do not show it to anyone. Jack looked at the dark packet. It sat on the table between them. It looked small, but it felt heavy with danger. Elias looked at the door again. He was sweating. Please, Elias said. If they get the map, they will destroy the world. You have a good heart. I can see it. Jack hesitated. He looked at the old man's desperate face. Slowly, Jack reached out. He took the packet. It felt warm. He quickly put it inside his coat pocket, next to his heart. Good. Elias breathed. He looked relieved. Now, listen to me. If something happens to me. Suddenly, the heavy wooden door of the tavern burst open. It hit the wall. The wind blew the candles out. The room went silent. 3 men stood in the doorway. They were big and ugly. They wore long black coats and carried sharp swords. The man in the middle stepped forward. He had a bald head and a skull tattoo on his neck. Elias closed his eyes. They are here. The tavern was deadly silent. The man with the skull tattoo walked into the room. His heavy boots made a loud noise on the floor. He looked around with dark, angry eyes. Then, he saw the old man in the corner. "There you are," the pirate said. He had a deep, scratching voice. "We looked everywhere for you, Elias." Elias stood up slowly. He put his hands up. "I do not have what you want." He lied. His voice shook. The pirate laughed. "We will see." He signaled to the other 2 men. "Get him." The 2 men moved forward. They pulled out long knives. Jack looked at Elias. The old man was terrified. Jack felt a sudden burst of anger. He could not let these men hurt Elias. When the first pirate reached the table, Jack stood up quickly. He was fast. He grabbed a heavy glass bottle from the table and swung it. The bottle hit the pirate on the head. The man fell to the floor. The room erupted into chaos. The customers screamed and ran to the walls. "You fool!" the bald pirate shouted. He pulled a long, sharp sword from his belt. The metal shined in the firelight. Jack kicked the table over. It fell on its side and created a wooden wall between him and the pirates. The bald man slashed at the table with his sword. Wood chips flew into the air. "Run, Jack!" Elias shouted. "Run now!" The third pirate jumped over the fallen table. He grabbed Jack's coat. Jack turned and used his strength. He worked on the docks every day. His arms were powerful. He punched the pirate hard in the chest. The man gasped and let go. Jack looked for a weapon, but he had nothing. He picked up a wooden stool. The bald captain stepped forward and swung his sword at Jack. Jack blocked the sword with the stool. The sword cut deep into the wood. Elias jumped on the bald pirate's back. He tried to hold the man's arms. "Go! Save the map!" Elias screamed. The pirate threw Elias off easily. The old man hit the wall and slid down. He did not move. "No!" Jack yelled. He wanted to help Elias, but the pirates were too close. If he stayed, they would kill him and take the map. He had to survive. Jack threw the broken stool at the bald man. While the pirate dodged, Jack turned and ran toward the kitchen. He jumped over the bar counter. Bottles and glasses fell and broke on the floor. "Stop him!" the bald pirate roared. Jack did not look back. He ran through the kitchen and kicked the back door open. He burst out into the cool night air. He was alive, but he was alone. Jack ran. His boots splashed in the dirty puddles. The alley behind the tavern was narrow and dark. The air smelled of rotten garbage and wet stone. Jack did not know where he was going. He only knew he had to get away. His heart beat fast in his chest. It felt like a drum. He heard angry voices behind him. "Find him!" He went this way. It was the bald pirate. Jack turned a corner sharply. He saw a pile of old wooden barrels. He quickly ducked behind them. He pressed his back against the cold brick wall and held his breath. 2 pirates ran past the barrels. They held lanterns. The yellow light swung back and forth on the wet walls. They did not see Jack. They continued down the street, their heavy boots loud on the stones. Jack waited until the sound of their footsteps disappeared. He let out a long breath. His hands were shaking. He reached into his pocket and felt the packet. The map was still there. It felt heavy, like a stone. Because of this small piece of paper, Elias was gone. "I am sorry, Elias," Jack whispered into the darkness. He stood up slowly. His legs felt weak. He wanted to go home. He wanted to lock his door and sleep in his bed. But he stopped. He realized he could not go home. The pirates saw his face. They knew he was a dock worker. If they asked around the port, someone would tell them his name. They would find his house. If he went home, he was a dead man. Jack looked up at the sky. The moon was hidden behind dark clouds. A light rain began to fall. It washed the sweat from his face. "I have to leave," Jack thought. "I have to leave Oak Haven tonight." He had no bag, no extra clothes, and very little money. He only had the clothes on his back and the mysterious map. It was terrifying, but he had no choice. If he stayed in the city, the pirates would find him. Jack pulled his collar up to hide his face. He stayed in the shadows. He moved quietly, like a cat. He avoided the main streets where the street lamps burned. He took the small, winding paths that only locals knew. He walked toward the harbor. The sea was his only escape. He needed a ship. Any ship. As long as it was leaving Oak Haven, he would take it. He looked back at the sleeping city one last time. This was his home. But now it was a trap. He turned his back on the town and walked into the night. The harbor was different at night. In the day, it was loud and bright. Now, it was a world of shadows and strange shapes. A thick gray mist rolled in from the ocean. It covered the water and the wooden piers. It made everything look ghostly. Jack walked carefully on the wet wood. He kept his head down. The mist was cold and wet on his skin, but he was thankful for it. It was a good blanket to hide under. He passed many ships. Some were huge merchant ships with tall masts that touched the stars. Others were small fishing boats that smelled of old nets. Most of the ships were dark and quiet. The crews were asleep. Jack needed a ship that was awake. He needed a ship that was ready to sail soon. Suddenly, Jack stopped. He heard voices nearby. He quickly pressed his body against a large stack of rope. He peered around the corner. 2 men walked along the dock. They carried bright yellow lanterns. The light cut through the fog. Jack's heart skipped a beat. It was them. The pirates from the tavern. They were searching the port. "Check that ship," one pirate said. He pointed to a large cargo vessel. "Maybe he is hiding in the cargo. We will find him." The other man grunted. "Captain Ironhand does not forgive failure." Jack held his breath. They were hunting him like a wolf hunts a rabbit. He waited until the men walked up the ramp of the cargo ship. Then, he moved. He ran softly, staying in the darkest parts of the dock. He jumped over coils of rope and dodged rusty anchors. He moved deeper into the harbor, away from the main entrance. He went toward the far end of the docks, where the faster, smaller ships usually docked. He looked at every ship he passed. Too small, he thought, looking at a fishing boat. Too slow, he thought, looking at a heavy coal barge. Then, he saw something. Far down the pier, a lantern glowed. It was not a search party. It was a light on a ship. Jack moved closer. The ship was beautiful. It was not a clumsy merchant ship. It was sleek and narrow. The wood was painted a dark blue color. It had 3 tall masts and looked built for speed. The ship was busy. Sailors were moving on the deck. They were loading barrels and pulling ropes. They were preparing to leave. Jack watched from behind a crate. This was it. This was his chance. If he could get on that ship, he could escape the pirates. He did not know where the ship was going, and he did not care. Anywhere was better than here. He took a deep breath, checked the map in his pocket one last time, and stepped out of the shadows. Jack pulled his coat tight around his shoulders. He walked toward the sleek blue ship. He tried to look confident, but his legs felt heavy. He needed this ship to take him away. If they said no, he was trapped. A large wooden ramp connected the dock to the ship's deck. Jack stepped onto the wood. Immediately, a shadow moved at the top of the ramp. A giant sailor stepped forward. He had arms as thick as tree trunks and a face full of scars. He held a heavy club in his hand. "Hold it right there." The sailor grunted. He blocked Jack's path. "Where do you think you are going?" Jack swallowed hard. He tried to keep his voice steady. "I'm looking for work." Jack said, "I want to join your crew." The giant sailor looked Jack up and down. He laughed. It was a dry, mean sound. "We don't need any more hands. Especially not a soft dock rat like you. This is a fast ship, not a nursery." "I'm not soft," Jack argued. He stepped closer. "I am the strongest worker in Oak Haven. I can lift anything. I can work all day without rest. Give me a chance." The sailor stopped laughing. His face turned angry. He pointed the club at Jack's chest. "I said no. We sail in 1 hour. Get off my ramp before I throw you into the water." Jack looked past the sailor. On the deck, men were busy. They were tying ropes and checking sails. They looked like a professional crew. They moved with purpose. Jack knew this was a good ship. He stepped back down to the dock. He felt defeated. He looked back toward the entrance of the harbor. His blood turned to ice. The yellow lanterns of the pirate search party were getting closer. They were only 3 ships away. Jack could hear their voices now. They were shouting at a captain on a fishing boat, asking about a young man with a gray coat. Jack looked down at his own gray coat. He was a sitting duck. He could not run back into the city. The pirates were behind him. He could not jump into the water. The current was too strong. He looked back at the blue ship. It was his only hope. He could not take no for an answer. The giant sailor had turned his back and was talking to another crew member. "I have to speak to the captain." Jack thought. The captain makes the decisions, not the guard. He did not walk up the ramp this time. Instead, he moved to the side of the ship. He found a thick rope hanging down from the railing. It was slippery with mist, but it was a way up. Jack grabbed the rope. He prayed his strength was enough. He began to climb up the side of the ship, hand over hand, toward the deck. Jack's hands burned. The rope was wet and rough against his palms. The cold mist made the wood slippery. He pulled himself up, inch by inch. His muscles ached from the long day of work, but fear gave him energy. Below him, the dark water swirled. If he fell, the heavy current would pull him under. He reached the top of the railing. He paused and listened. He heard heavy footsteps on the wooden deck, but they were walking away from him. Jack took a deep breath. He swung his leg over the rail and rolled quietly onto the deck. He landed in a crouch behind a large water barrel. He was on board. Jack stayed low. He looked around his new environment. This ship was different from the ones he worked on at the docks. It was not messy or dirty. The deck was scrubbed clean. The ropes were coiled in perfect circles. The brass metal fittings shined even in the moonlight. Near the center of the ship, a large brass bell hung from a post. Engraved on the metal were the words, "The Blue Bird." The Blue Bird. Jack thought, a strange name for a ship. But it fit. The ship was elegant and looked ready to fly across the waves. Jack peered through a gap in the railings. He looked down at the dock. His heart stopped. The bald pirate and his men were at the bottom of the ramp. They were talking to the giant sailor who had rejected Jack earlier. "We are looking for a fugitive," the bald pirate shouted. "A rat from the docks." The giant sailor crossed his arms. He did not look afraid. "I told you. No rats here. Only my crew. Now leave. We sail on the tide." The pirates looked angry, but they did not step onto the ramp. The giant sailor was very intimidating. They turned and walked toward the next ship. Jack let out a quiet breath. He was safe for now. But the ship would leave soon. If the crew found him, they would throw him overboard. He needed to find a place to hide until they were out at sea. Or, he needed to convince the captain to let him stay. He crept toward the back of the ship. There was a cabin there with lights in the windows. It looked like the captain's quarters. Maybe he could talk to the captain. It was a risk, but Jack had no other choice. He took a step forward. Suddenly, the wood creaked loudly under his boot. A door opened instantly. Light poured out onto the dark deck. A figure stepped out of the cabin. It was not a man. It was a woman with long red hair and a long coat. She held a pistol in her hand. She pointed it straight at Jack's head. The woman did not lower the gun. Her hand was perfectly steady. She stood in the doorway of the cabin, bathed in the yellow light from the lanterns inside. She was tall and slender, but she looked strong. Her hair was a deep, fiery red, tied back with a black ribbon. She wore a long dark coat with gold buttons, men's trousers, and high leather boots. She looked more dangerous than any man in the tavern. "I will ask you one time," she said. Her voice was calm, but it was cold as ice. "Who are you, and why are you sneaking on my deck?" Jack raised his hands slowly. He showed her his open palms. "My name is Jack. I am not a thief. I am not a spy. You are on my ship without permission," the woman said. She cocked the pistol. The mechanical click was very loud in the quiet night. "That makes you an enemy." "I needed a place to hide," Jack said quickly. "I climbed the rope on the side." The woman raised an eyebrow. She looked at the railing, then back at Jack. "You climbed the wet hull without falling." For a second, she looked impressed, but her face quickly became hard again. "You are either a very good sailor or a very desperate fool." "I am desperate," Jack admitted. "Please. I just need passage out of Oak Haven. I will work. I am strong." The woman laughed. It was not a kind laugh. "This is the Blue Bird. We are not a ferry for runaways. I am Captain Rose, and I do not take passengers." She whistled sharply. Immediately, heavy footsteps shook the deck. The giant sailor from the dock ran up the stairs. He looked even bigger up close. He held his heavy wooden club. "Captain!" The giant grunted. He saw Jack and growled. "You! I told you to leave. Throw him overboard." "Barnaby!" Captain Rose ordered. She put her pistol back in her belt. "We leave in 10 minutes. I do not want trash on my deck." Barnaby smiled. He stepped forward and grabbed Jack's collar with one hand. He lifted Jack off his feet as if he were a doll. Jack struggled, but the giant was too strong. Barnaby walked toward the railing. The dark, cold water waited below. Jack's mind raced. He was going to die. He had to do something. He had to offer them something they could not refuse. "Wait!" Jack shouted. "I can pay you." Barnaby did not stop. "You have no money, dock rat." "Not money!" Jack yelled. He looked at Captain Rose. She was turning away to go back into her cabin. "I have a map. A map to the golden compass of the East." Captain Rose froze. She stopped with her hand on the door handle. She turned around slowly. Her green eyes locked onto Jack's face. "Put him down, Barnaby," she said quietly. Barnaby opened his large hand. Jack fell onto the hard wooden deck. He landed on his knees, gasping for air. He rubbed his neck where the giant had held him. Captain Rose walked closer. Her boots clicked on the wood. She looked down at Jack with sharp, intelligent eyes. "You said the golden compass," Rose said. Her voice was low. "That is a legend. Sailors talk about it when they are drunk. It does not exist." Jack stood up slowly. He fixed his coat. "It is not a legend. I have the proof right here." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the dark, oily packet. He held it tight. He did not offer it to her yet. "Let me see," Rose ordered. She held out a gloved hand. Jack hesitated. He looked at the black water over the railing. "If I give it to you, you will throw me overboard. I know how pirates work." Rose smiled. It was a thin, dangerous smile. "If you do not give it to me, Barnaby will take it from your dead body. You have no choice, Jack." Jack knew she was right. He sighed and placed the packet in her hand. Rose took it. She untied the string carefully. She unfolded the old, yellow paper. She held it up to the lantern light. She studied the map for a long time. Her eyes moved back and forth across the paper. She traced a line with her finger. Her expression changed. She looked surprised. "This is real," she whispered. "This is Elias's handwriting. I know his mark." She looked at Jack. "Where is Elias?" "He is dead," Jack said. "Iron Hand's men found him at the tavern. He gave me the map before the end." Rose's face became serious. She folded the map and put it inside her own long coat. "Hey!" Jack stepped forward. "That is mine." "Not anymore," Rose said. "You are on my ship. Everything on this ship belongs to the captain." She turned to Barnaby. "Prepare to sail. Immediately. Iron Hand will be looking for this boy." She looked back at Jack. "You want to leave Oak Haven? Fine. You can stay. But you are not a guest. On the Blue Bird, everyone works. You will scrub the decks. You will climb the masts. You will do what I say." "And the treasure?" Jack asked. "If we find the compass." Rose paused. She looked at the horizon. "If the map is real, and we find the treasure, we will share it. That is the deal." She extended her hand. Jack shook it. Her grip was strong and firm. "Welcome to the crew, Jack," Rose said. Suddenly, a shout came from the dock. Jack looked down. The bald pirate and his men were running toward the ship. They saw Jack on the deck. "Stop that ship!" they yelled. "Raise the anchor!" Rose shouted to her crew. "Drop the sails!" The ship began to move. The wind caught the white sails. The Blue Bird pulled away from the dock, leaving the angry pirates behind. Jack was safe, but his adventure was just beginning. The lights of Oak Haven became small yellow stars in the distance. Jack stood at the back of the ship and watched them fade. The cool wind hit his face. He felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. His old life was gone. He was a sailor now. "Stop dreaming, boy," a loud voice boomed. Jack turned around. It was Barnaby, the giant. He did not have his wooden club now, but he held a heavy bucket and a stiff brush. He dropped them at Jack's feet. The captain said you work. Barnaby grunted. So, you work. The deck is dirty. Clean it. Jack looked at the bucket. It was full of cold seawater. Now. It is the middle of the night. On a ship. The work never stops. Barnaby said. He crossed his massive arms. You are the newest sailor. That means you do the jobs nobody else wants to do. Start scrubbing. Jack did not argue. He took off his coat and rolled up his sleeves. He got down on his knees on the hard wood. He dipped the brush into the water and began to scrub. The deck was rough. The salt water stung his hands. Jack scrubbed the wood until his arms ached. He worked his way across the ship. The other sailors walked past him. They ignored him. To them, he was just a stranger who climbed aboard. He was not part of the family yet. Jack watched them as he worked. They moved with an easy rhythm. They knew exactly which ropes to pull and when to turn the sails. They spoke a language Jack did not understand, full of words like starboard, port, and halyard. He felt clumsy and useless. After 2 hours, Jack's back felt like it was on fire. He stopped to wipe sweat from his forehead. "Did I say you could stop?" Barnaby asked. He was standing right behind Jack. He moved so quietly for such a big man. "I'm just resting." Jack said. "Rest when you are dead." Barnaby said. But then, his face softened a little. He pointed to a wooden hatch in the floor. "That is enough for tonight. Go below. Find a hammock. We need you strong for tomorrow." Jack nodded. "Thank you, Barnaby." "Don't thank me." Barnaby muttered. "Tomorrow you will climb the mast. Then you will wish you were scrubbing the floor." Jack walked to the hatch and climbed down the ladder. The lower deck was dark, warm, and smelled of sleeping men and old wood. Rows of hammocks swung gently with the motion of the ship. Jack found an empty hammock in the corner. He had never slept in one before. It was difficult to get in, but he was too tired to care. He lay back and closed his eyes. The ship rocked him like a baby. He touched his chest. The map was gone, safe with Captain Rose. But he was here. He was alive. And for the first time in his life, he was free. Morning arrived with the ringing of a loud bell. Jack woke up with a start. For a second, he forgot where he was. The floor moved beneath him. Then he remembered. He was on the Blue Bird, in the middle of the ocean. He tried to get out of the hammock. It swung wildly, and Jack fell onto the wooden floor. Some sailors laughed nearby. "Get up, new boy." A sailor shouted. "Breakfast time." Jack stood up. His body hurt. His arms were sore from scrubbing the deck, and his neck was stiff. He followed the other men to the galley, the ship's kitchen. It was a small room that smelled of boiled oats and dried fish. At the front of the line stood Barnaby. The giant man was not holding a club today. He held a large wooden spoon. He served a grey, sticky porridge into bowls. When Jack reached the front, Barnaby looked at him. "Sleep well, Jack." "Not really," Jack admitted. He took the bowl of porridge. "It is hard to sleep when the bed moves." Barnaby chuckled. "You will get used to it. Or you will go crazy. Next." Jack sat on a bench next to an older sailor with one eye. He ate the porridge. It had no taste, but it was warm. After the meal, the crew gathered on the main deck. Captain Rose stood at the wheel on the upper deck. She looked like a statue, watching the wind and the waves. But it was Barnaby who stepped forward to speak to the men. "Listen up," Barnaby shouted. The crew went silent. "We have a long journey. We need to check the water barrels and repair the mainsail. Work hard. and we eat well. Be lazy, and you get no dinner." Jack watched him. Barnaby was not just a guard. He was important. Later, Jack found Barnaby checking a list of supplies. "I have a question," Jack said cautiously. Barnaby looked up. "Make it fast. I am busy." "You are the quartermaster, right?" Jack asked. "What does that mean?" Barnaby straightened his back. "It means I am the mother and father of this crew. Captain Rose decides where we go. She fights the battles. But I decide what we eat, how much we drink, and who gets punished. The captain commands the ship. I command the men." He pointed a thick finger at Jack. "If you have a problem, you come to me. If you fight, you answer to me. Do you understand?" "I understand," Jack said. "Good," Barnaby said. He reached into a barrel and pulled out a hard, dry biscuit. He threw it to Jack. "Here. Keep this in your pocket. You will get hungry later. The sea makes a man empty inside." Jack looked at the biscuit. It was as hard as a rock. "Thanks, Barnaby. Now go." Barnaby grunted. "The sails need pulling. Make yourself useful." Jack nodded and ran to the ropes. He respected Barnaby. The man was scary, but he was fair. Jack realized that on this ship, survival depended on two things: the captain's brain and the quartermaster's strength. By midday, the world changed. Jack stood by the railing and looked behind the ship. In the morning, he could see the green hills and the brown cliffs of the coast. Now, there was nothing. The land was just a thin gray line on the horizon. Then, it disappeared completely. For the first time in his life, Jack was surrounded by water. It was not like the water in the harbor. The harbor water was green and dirty. This water was deep, dark blue. It looked clean and dangerous. The waves were bigger here. They rolled under the ship like sleeping giants. The blue bird went up and down, up and down. It was a slow, steady rhythm. "Keep your eyes on the ropes, not the water," a voice shouted. Jack turned around. It was the one-eyed sailor he met at breakfast. His name was Patch. He was an old man with skin like leather and a black patch over his left eye. "Sorry," Jack said. He grabbed the thick rope in front of him. "The ocean will hypnotize you," Patch said. He walked over to help Jack. "You look at the horizon too long, and you forget who you are. That is how men fall overboard." Patch showed Jack how to tie a knot. His fingers were crooked, but they moved very fast. "This is a bowline knot," Patch explained. "It saves lives. Learn it." Jack tried to copy him. It was difficult. The rope was stiff. "We are very far from home," Jack said. Patch laughed. "Home? A sailor has no home, Jack. The ship is your home. The sea is your garden. And the wind is your boss." Jack looked up at the sails. They were full of wind, pushing the ship forward. The wood of the ship groaned and creaked. Jack used to think these sounds were scary, but now they sounded like music. It was the sound of a machine working perfectly. Captain Rose stood on the quarterdeck. She held a brass telescope. She looked north. She did not look at the crew. She was focused on the path ahead. Jack wondered what she was thinking. Was she thinking about the treasure? Or was she thinking about Iron Hand chasing them? "Pull!" Barnaby shouted from the front of the ship. Jack and Patch pulled the rope together. The heavy canvas sail moved. The ship turned slightly to the right. "Good," Patch said. He slapped Jack on the shoulder. "You are learning. You are strong for a dock rat." Jack smiled. His hands were red and sore, but he felt proud. He was not just a passenger anymore. He was helping the ship move. He looked out at the endless blue circle around them. Oak Haven was gone. His old life was gone. There was only the open water, the sky, and the wooden planks under his boots. He took a deep breath of the fresh, salty air. He was ready for whatever came next. The excitement of the first day quickly disappeared. In its place came pain and sickness. The open ocean was not calm. It was a restless beast. The ship moved constantly. It rolled side to side, and it pitched forward and backward. Jack's stomach could not handle the motion. He felt dizzy all the time. His face turned green. For the first 3 days, he spent his free time leaning over the railing, throwing up into the sea. "Get up, Jack!" Barnaby shouted on the second morning. Jack was sitting on the floor, holding his head. I think I am dying." Jack groaned. "The world is spinning. It is just the sea." Barnaby said without sympathy, "You will get used to it, or you will starve. Now, pick up that stone. The deck needs cleaning." Work on the Blue Bird was brutal. It started before the sun came up and ended long after the sun went down. The most common job was holystoning. The sailors used heavy blocks of sandstone to scrub the wooden deck. They knelt on the wet wood for hours. They rubbed the stone back and forth until the wood turned white and clean. Jack's knees bled. His back felt broken. But Barnaby did not let him stop. "Harder!" Barnaby yelled. "I want to see my face in the wood." When Jack was not scrubbing, he was pulling ropes. The sails were heavy, and the ropes were rough. Jack's hands, which were already tough from the docks, developed new, painful blisters. When the blisters broke, the salt water stung the open skin like fire. Jack wrapped his hands in old cloth strips, but it did not help much. Every time he grabbed a rope, he winced in pain. "Are you regretting your choice?" Patch asked one afternoon. They were sitting on a coil of rope, taking a short break. Jack looked at his bandaged hands. He looked at the endless horizon. There was no land, only grey water and grey sky. "Maybe," Jack admitted. "I thought being a pirate was about adventure, about treasure. This is just work. It is harder than the docks." Patch nodded. He took a bite of a dry biscuit. "The stories leave out the hard parts, Jack. They tell you about the gold. They don't tell you about the blisters, the bad food, and the seasickness. But this is the price of freedom. You work for the ship, and the ship takes you anywhere you want." Jack looked up at the quarterdeck. Captain Rose was there, as always. She looked calm and strong. She did not look tired. Jack stood up. He ignored the pain in his stomach and his hands. "I am not quitting," Jack said firmly. Patch smiled. "Good. Because look at the sky. The clouds are changing color." Jack looked up. The sky was turning a dark, bruised purple. The wind was getting colder. "What does that mean?" Jack asked. "It means the easy days are over," Patch said seriously. "A storm is coming." The sky turned a deep, angry black. The purple clouds that Patch saw earlier grew larger and covered the sun. The air became heavy and cold. The birds were gone. The sea, once blue and rhythmic, turned into a chaotic mess of dark grey peaks and white foam. "All hands on deck," Barnaby roared. His voice fought against the rising wind. "Secure the cargo. Tie down the loose ropes. Move." Jack ran to the center of the ship. The wind pushed against him like a giant hand. It was hard to stand up. The ship pitched violently to the left, and Jack almost fell. He grabbed a railing just in time. Rain began to fall. It was not a gentle shower. The drops were large and heavy. They hit Jack's face like small stones. Within seconds, he was completely soaked. The water on the deck swirled around his boots. "Jack! Get to the main mast!" Barnaby shouted. He pointed up. "Help Patch furl the sail. If we leave it open, the wind will rip it apart." Jack looked up. The mast swayed back and forth in the sky. It looked terrifying. But he could not say no. He ran to the rope ladder. The rungs were slippery with rain. He climbed slowly. The higher he went, the stronger the wind blew. It tried to pull him off the ladder. Below him, the deck looked chaotic. Sailors were running everywhere, pulling lines and shouting. At the back of the ship, Captain Rose stood at the wheel. She struggled to turn it. 2 other sailors helped her hold it steady. The waves crashed over the sides of the ship, washing across the wood. Jack reached the yardarm, the horizontal wood where the sail hung. Patch was already there. "Pull the canvas up!" Patch yelled. The wind was so loud Jack could hardly hear him. They grabbed the heavy, wet fabric. It was incredibly heavy. The wind filled the sail, making it fight back. Jack's fingers slipped. He gritted his teeth and pulled harder. He used every muscle in his body. Slowly, they tied the sail tight against the wood. Suddenly, a massive wave rose up in front of the ship. It was a wall of water, higher than the bow. "Hold on!" Patch screamed. Jack wrapped his arms and legs around the thick mast. He closed his eyes. The ship climbed up the side of the monstrous wave. Up, up, up. For a second, they hung at the top, looking down into a dark valley of water. Then, the blue bird fell forward. The ship slammed down into the trough of the wave. The impact shook Jack's bones. Water sprayed everywhere, reaching even up to the mast. The wood of the ship groaned loudly, a terrible sound of stress and strain. Jack opened his eyes. He was still alive. He looked down at the deck. It was flooded with water. "Is it over?" Jack shouted to Patch. Patch shook his head. Water dripped from his nose. "No, lad. That was just the beginning." The storm raged for hours. The sky was black, lit only by flashes of lightning. The thunder shook the air. Jack was back on the deck now. He held onto a railing with both hands. His knuckles were white. Suddenly, there was a terrible sound. It sounded like a tree snapping in the forest. "Look out!" Barnaby screamed. Jack looked up. One of the smaller wooden beams on the front mast had broken. It hung by a single rope. The wind blew it back and forth. It swung like a giant pendulum. The heavy would hit the side of the ship. Wood splinters flew into the air. If it hit the main deck, it would make a hole in the ship. If the ship had a hole, they would sink. "We need to secure it." Captain Rose shouted from the wheel. She could not leave her post. She was fighting to keep the ship facing the waves. Barnaby grabbed a coil of thick rope. He looked at Jack. "Come with me. We have to tie it down." Jack didn't want to let go of the railing. The deck was tilted at a dangerous angle. Water rushed over his boots. But he nodded. He let go and ran after Barnaby. They ran toward the front of the ship. The broken beam swung toward them. Barnaby ducked just in time. The wood passed over his head. "I will catch it," Barnaby yelled. "You tie the knot." Barnaby waited for the beam to swing back. He was brave. He stood tall on the slippery deck. When the wood came close, he opened his massive arms. He caught the beam. The impact pushed him back, but his boots held firm on the deck. He grunted with effort. "Now, Jack. Tie it." Jack scrambled forward. His hands shook from the cold and fear. He wrapped the rope around the broken wood and the railing. He pulled it tight. He made 3 strong knots, just like Patch taught him. "It is tight," Jack shouted. Barnaby let go. The beam stayed in place. It did not swing. The ship was safe from the damage. They sat down heavily on the wet deck, breathing hard. Jack wiped the rain from his eyes. He looked at Barnaby. The giant man gave him a nod of respect. "Good work," Barnaby said. "You are fast." Slowly, the wind began to die down. The rain became lighter. The waves were still big, but they were not mountains anymore. The storm was passing. Jack looked around the ship. The Blue Bird was a mess. Ropes were tangled. Barrels were overturned. The railing was broken where the beam hit it. But the ship was still floating. They were alive. Captain Rose called out from the back of the ship. "Check the hull. Check for leaks. We survived the night, but we have work to do." Jack stood up. His legs felt like jelly. He was exhausted, wet, and cold. But as he looked at the rising sun breaking through the grey clouds, he felt strong. He had faced the ocean's anger, and he had won. 2 days after the storm, the mood on the ship changed. The grey clouds disappeared. The sun came out, hot and bright. The sea turned a beautiful turquoise color. Jack was scrubbing the deck, as usual. Suddenly, a sailor high in the crow's nest shouted, "Land ho!" Jack stood up and ran to the railing. Far ahead, he saw a green shape in the blue water. It grew larger as the ship sailed closer. It was an island. It looked like a jewel. There were tall green mountains, white sandy beaches, and palm trees swaying in the wind. After the terror of the storm, the island looked like paradise. Captain Rose steered the Blue Bird into a small, quiet bay. The water was so clear that Jack could see colorful fish swimming near the bottom. "Drop the anchor," Rose ordered. The heavy iron anchor splashed into the water. The ship stopped moving. It sat still on the calm water. Barnaby walked onto the main deck. He pointed at a group of sailors. You, and Jack. Get the rowboat ready. We are going ashore." Jack felt a rush of excitement. He wanted to feel solid ground under his feet again. They lowered a small wooden boat into the water. Barnaby, Jack, and 2 other sailors climbed in. They rowed toward the beach. The sun was hot on their backs. When the boat hit the sand, Jack jumped out. He stumbled. His legs felt strange. The ground was not moving, but his head still felt the motion of the sea. "Careful." Barnaby laughed. "That is land sickness. It will pass." They pulled the boat up onto the dry sand. The beach was quiet. The only sounds were the waves and the cry of tropical birds in the trees. "All right, listen," Barnaby said. He looked at the thick jungle behind the beach. "We have work to do. The storm broke our water barrels. We need fresh water. And we need strong wood to fix the broken railing." He handed Jack 2 large empty buckets. "Jack, you and Patch go find a fresh water spring. The rest of us will cut wood." Jack took the buckets. He looked at the jungle. The trees were tall and grew very close together. Vines hung down like green ropes. It looked dark and mysterious inside. "Stay close to the path," Barnaby warned. "Islands like this can be tricky. You don't know what is living in there." "I will be careful," Jack said. He followed Patch into the trees. The air instantly became cooler and darker. The smell of the ocean was replaced by the smell of wet earth and sweet flowers. Jack heard rustling in the bushes. "Do not worry," Patch said, hacking at a vine with his knife. "Probably just a monkey." Jack looked back at the beach. The bright white sand was disappearing behind the green leaves. He gripped the handle of the bucket tighter. He was happy to be off the ship, but the jungle felt like it was watching him. Jack and Patch found a small stream of clear water. It flowed over smooth grey stones. They filled the heavy wooden buckets. The water was cool and tasted sweet, much better than the old water on the ship. "We should go back," Patch said. He wiped sweat from his face. "The sun is moving." Jack nodded, but then he heard a noise. He froze. He looked into the dense green bushes. He saw a shape moving. It was a wild pig. It was small and brown, digging in the dirt for roots. Jack's stomach rumbled. He thought about the hard, dry biscuits he ate every day. He thought about the salty dried fish. The crew was hungry for fresh meat. If he brought a pig back to the ship, he would be a hero. Barnaby would be happy. Captain Rose would be impressed. "Patch," Jack whispered. "Look. Meat." Patch looked. He shook his head. "Leave it, Jack. We have the water. Do not leave the path. It will only take a minute," Jack said. He put his buckets down quietly. "I am fast. I can catch it." Before Patch could stop him, Jack moved. He stepped into the thick bushes. The pig heard him. It squealed and ran away. Jack ran after it. He ran past large fern leaves and thick tree trunks. The pig was fast, but Jack was faster. He kept his eyes on the brown shape. He jumped over fallen logs and ducked under low branches. The thrill of the hunt made his heart beat fast. He forgot about the map. He forgot about the pirates. He only wanted the prize. The pig turned left, then right. It ran deeper into the jungle. Jack followed. He ran for 10 minutes. Finally, the pig squeezed into a small hole under a giant tree. It was gone. Jack stopped. He was breathing hard. He kicked the dirt in frustration. So close. He muttered. He stood up straight and looked around. The jungle was very quiet here. The trees were taller and blocked out much of the sunlight. The air felt heavy and still. "Okay," Jack said to himself. "Time to go back." He turned around. He looked for his footprints, but the ground was covered in thick leaves. He could not see where he came from. He looked for the path, but every direction looked the same. Every tree looked like the last tree. "Patch!" Jack shouted. A flock of birds flew out of a tree, startled by the noise. But there was no answer. "Patch!" "Barnaby!" Silence returned. Jack felt a cold drop of fear in his stomach. He remembered Barnaby's warning. Islands like this can be tricky. He chose a direction that looked right and started walking. After 20 minutes, he saw a large rock with unique yellow moss. He stopped. He knew this rock. He had passed it 10 minutes ago. He was walking in circles. Jack sat down on the rock. He was alone. He had no water, no weapon, and no compass. The jungle was a green maze, and he was trapped in the middle of it. Jack forced himself to stand up. Sitting on the rock would not help him. He needed to keep moving. He looked up at the sky. The sun was going down. The jungle was getting darker. Shadows stretched out like long black fingers. "Think, Jack," he whispered. "You are a sailor now. Use your head." He remembered Patch telling him about the sun. It rose in the east and set in the west. If the beach was to the south, he needed to keep the setting sun on his right side. Jack started walking again. He moved slowly. He used a heavy stick to push the vines away. The air was hot and humid. Mosquitoes buzzed around his ears. Suddenly, his foot hit something hard. It was not a tree root. It felt like stone. Jack stopped and looked down. Hidden under a thick layer of green ferns was a square block. It looked unnatural. Jack knelt down. He used his hands to tear away the plants and wet moss. His heart beat faster. It was a stone pillar, about as tall as his waist. It was made of black rock, different from the grey stones in the river. He cleaned the surface of the stone. There was a carving on the side. It was worn by time and rain, but Jack could still see it clearly. It was a skull. But it was not a normal pirate skull. This skull had a compass star carved into its forehead. Jack gasped. He reached into his pocket. He did not have the map. Captain Rose had it, but he remembered the drawing on it perfectly. The map had the same symbol in the corner, a skull with a compass star. This is not just a random island. Jack realized. This is a marker. He looked around the small clearing. Now that he looked closely, he saw other signs. There were old cut marks on the trees, healed over by time. Someone had been here before. Someone who knew about the golden compass. Jack ran his fingers over the stone. There was an arrow carved below the skull. It pointed straight through the thickest part of the jungle, toward the center of the island. Jack wanted to follow it. He wanted to see where the arrow led. But the light was fading fast. If he walked deeper into the jungle now, he would be lost in the dark. He would never find the ship. I have to tell Captain Rose. Jack thought. This proves the map is real. He looked at the stone one last time to memorize the location. He noticed a large, twisted tree with blue flowers standing next to it. That would be his landmark. Jack turned back toward the way he came. He felt a new burst of energy. He was not just a lost boy anymore. He was a scout who had found a vital clue. He checked the sun again and began to push his way back toward the sea. The jungle was almost completely dark. Jack stumbled over roots and pushed through heavy vines. His clothes were torn, and his face was dirty. But he did not stop. He could hear the sound of the waves crashing on the shore. It was the best sound in the world. He burst out of the trees and fell onto the white sand. He breathed hard, gasping for air. Down the beach, he saw a fire. The crew was waiting by the rowboat. Barnaby stood up when he saw Jack. The giant looked angry. He walked quickly across the sand. "Where have you been?" Barnaby shouted. "We have been waiting for an hour. The tide is turning." Jack stood up. His legs shook. "I am sorry, Barnaby. I saw a pig. I tried to catch it." Barnaby looked at Jack's empty hands. "I see no pig. And where are the water buckets?" Jack realized he had left the buckets at the stream when he started running. He had nothing. He had failed his job. "I lost them," Jack admitted. Barnaby's face turned red. "You foolish boy. You lost the equipment. You wasted our time." He raised a hand as if to grab Jack. "Wait." Jack yelled. "I found something else. Something better than a pig." Barnaby stopped. "What?" "I found a marker," Jack said quickly. "In the jungle. A black stone pillar. It had a carving on it. A skull with a compass star on its forehead." Barnaby went quiet. The other sailors gathered around. Patch stepped forward. "Are you sure, lad?" Patch asked seriously. "I am sure," Jack said. "It had an arrow, too. It pointed toward the center of the island." Barnaby looked at Patch, then back at Jack. His anger disappeared. "Get in the boat," he ordered. "We need to tell the captain." They pushed the rowboat into the water and rowed hard back to the Blue Bird. The moon was rising, painting the water in silver light. When they climbed aboard the ship, Barnaby took Jack straight to the captain's cabin. Captain Rose was sitting at her desk, looking at the map. She looked up when they entered. "Report," she said. Barnaby pushed Jack forward. "Tell her." Jack described the stone marker, the skull, the star, and the arrow. Rose listened carefully. She did not blink. When Jack finished, she looked at the map again. She tapped a small black dot on the paper. "This island," she whispered. "It is not just a stopping point. It is the first gate." She looked at Jack. A small smile appeared on her face. "You did well, Jack. You have keen eyes. Most men would have just seen a rock." "Does this mean the treasure is here?" Jack asked. "No," Rose said. "The arrow points to the center. It likely leads to a clue, or a specific coordinate for the next leg of the journey. But we cannot go there tonight. The jungle is too dangerous in the dark." She stood up. "Go get some food and rest. Tomorrow at dawn, we will follow your arrow. We will see what Elias wanted us to find." Jack nodded. He left the cabin feeling proud. He had made a mistake, but he had fixed it. He was not just a dock worker anymore. He was a treasure hunter. The next morning, the sun rose like a red ball of fire. The sky was clear and the wind was gentle. Jack woke up feeling energetic. Today was the day. He was going to lead Captain Rose and the crew to the stone marker in the jungle. He ate his breakfast quickly. Barnaby was already on the main deck, sharpening his large sword. "Are you ready, guide?" Barnaby asked with a grin. "I am ready," Jack said. He felt important. "I know exactly where the tree with the blue flowers is." Captain Rose walked out of her cabin. She wore her long coat and her pistol. She looked at the island. "We must be quick," she said. "We get the clue, and we leave. I do not like staying in one place for too long." The sailors began to lower the rowboats. Jack stood by the railing, waiting for his turn. He looked out at the open sea, scanning the horizon. Then, he saw it. It was a small dark spot on the line where the sky met the sea. It looked like a storm cloud, but the sky was blue. Jack squinted his eyes. The spot was moving. It was growing larger. "Captain!" Jack shouted. He pointed to the west. "Look!" Rose turned sharply. She pulled out her brass telescope. She extended it and looked at the dark spot. She stood very still for a long moment. Then, she lowered the telescope slowly. Her face was pale. "Raise the boats," she ordered immediately. Her voice was loud and sharp. "Raise the anchor. Now." The crew looked confused. "But Captain," Barnaby said, "what about the clue? The stone marker." "Forget the stone," Rose yelled. She handed the telescope to Barnaby. "Look." Barnaby looked through the glass. He cursed under his breath. "It is the obsidian." Jack felt a cold chill. "Who is the obsidian?" Barnaby looked at Jack. His face was grim. "It is Captain Ironhand's ship, the fastest hunter on the sea." Jack looked back at the horizon. He could see the sails now. They were black. The ship was huge, much bigger than the Blue Bird. It was cutting through the waves, coming straight toward them. "He found us," Rose said. "She must have tracked us from Oak Haven. Or maybe he knows about this island too. What do we do?" Jack asked. He felt his heart hammering in his chest. "Do we fight?" "No," Rose said. "We cannot fight him. His ship has twice as many cannons as ours, and his crew is 3 times larger. If we fight, we die." She spun the wheel hard to the right. "We run," We have to outrun him. The sailors scrambled to pull the anchor up. The heavy chain rattled loudly. As soon as the anchor left the water, the sails caught the wind. The blue bird turned away from the beautiful island. Jack looked back at the green jungle. The secret of the stone marker was still there, hidden in the trees. They were leaving it behind. Do not look back, Jack, Barnaby said, pulling a rope tight. Look forward. The hunt has begun. Behind them, the black ship grew larger. A black flag with a red skull rose up its mast. Iron Hand was coming. The gap between the two ships was wide, but not wide enough. The blue bird cut through the waves, her sails stretched tight. Behind her, the obsidian followed like a dark shadow. It was a massive ship, heavy with cannons and men, but it was surprisingly fast. Jack stood near the stern with Barnaby. They watched the black ship. Why is everyone so afraid? Jack asked. He tried to sound brave, but his voice wavered. We have fought pirates before. We fought the men in the tavern. Barnaby shook his head. He looked grim. Those men in the tavern were just hired thugs. This is different. That is Captain Iron Hand. Who is he really? Jack asked. I heard the stories in Oakhaven, but they sounded like ghost stories. They are not stories, Barnaby said. He spat into the sea. He was once a Royal Navy officer, but he was too cruel. He loved violence too much. They tried to arrest him, so he killed his commander and took the ship. Barnaby pointed at the black flag in the distance. He lost his right hand in a sword fight 10 years ago. Instead of a hook, he made a hand of solid iron. He uses it to crush men's throats. He does not take prisoners, Jack. He takes slaves, or he feeds them to the sharks. Jack swallowed hard. He looked at the black ship with new fear. And he wants the map. He wants the compass. Barnaby corrected. He believes it will give him power over the ocean itself. If he gets it, no ship will be safe. He will rule the seas like a king. Suddenly, a puff of white smoke appeared on the side of the obsidian. A few seconds later, a dull thud echoed across the water. Splash! A pillar of water erupted 50 meters behind the blue bird. Cannon fire! Patch shouted from the main deck. They are in range. They are testing their distance. Barnaby growled. The next one will be closer. Captain Rose spun the wheel. Zigzag pattern. She ordered. Do not let them get a clear shot. The ship leaned hard to the left, then to the right. It made it harder for the enemy gunners to aim. Jack held onto the railing to keep his balance. He is playing with us, Barnaby said quietly. Iron Hand enjoys the hunt. He wants us to be afraid before he catches us. Jack looked at the iron determination on Captain Rose's face. She did not look afraid. She looked focused. She knew the ocean better than anyone. We are lighter than them, Jack said, remembering what he learned about ships. Can we go faster? We are trying, Barnaby said. But the wind is constant. We need a trick. We cannot outrun them in a straight line forever. Another puff of smoke appeared. This time, the cannonball flew over their heads. It whistled through the air and cut a hole in one of the smaller sails. Too close, Rose shouted. Barnaby, lighten the load. Throw the heavy cargo overboard. But Captain, Barnaby argued. The food. The spare timber. Throw it, Rose commanded. Better to be hungry than dead. Jack ran to help the crew. They began to lift heavy barrels and crates. With heavy hearts, they threw their supplies into the sea. The blue bird rose slightly in the water. She picked up speed. Jack looked back. The black ship was still there, relentless and hungry. The race for survival had truly begun. The plan to throw the cargo into the sea worked. The Blue Bird was much lighter now. It rose higher on the waves and moved faster. The gap between the two ships began to grow. The Obsidian was still chasing them, but it was falling behind slowly. Jack stood by the railing. He watched the white foam in the water. He was breathing hard. It was painful to watch the food and fresh water float away. They would be hungry later, but at least they were alive now. "Don't relax yet," Barnaby shouted. He walked down the deck. He checked every rope and every knot. "Iron Hand has more sails than us. If the wind changes, he will catch us in 10 minutes. Jack looked up at the sky. The wind was blowing from the north. It was strong and steady. The sails of the Blue Bird were stretched tight. They looked like hard white stomachs. The wood of the mast creaked loudly. It sounded like it was in pain. "Captain!" Barnaby called out. "The mast is bending. If we push it too hard, it will snap." Captain Rose did not let go of the wheel. Her hair whipped around her face. "Let it bend." She yelled back. "We need every inch of speed. Full canvas." Full canvas meant using every sail they had. It was dangerous. If the wind got too strong, the force could break the ship apart. But Rose was gambling with their lives. Jack ran to help Patch. They pulled a thick rope to tighten the top sail. The rope vibrated in his hands. "She is crazy," Patch muttered. But he pulled the rope anyway. "She is going to kill us to save us." "Is Iron Hand still firing?" Jack asked. He was afraid to look back. "No," Patch said. "We are out of range for now. But look at him." Jack looked. The black ship was far away, but it did not turn around. It cut through the water in a straight line. It looked like a shark smelling blood. It would never stop. 4 hours. They sailed at maximum speed. The sun began to dip lower in the sky. The crew was exhausted. They had not eaten or rested since the morning. Jack's arms felt like lead. Suddenly, the lookout in the crow's nest shouted again. "Wall ahead." Jack ran to the front of the ship. He expected to see land, or rocks. But he saw something else. Stretching across the ocean was a massive wall of gray and white. It looked like a cloud that had fallen from the sky and landed on the water. It was a fog bank. It was thick, tall, and endless. It blocked the horizon completely. "It is the White Maze," Barnaby whispered. He stood next to Jack. "Sailors go in there and never come out. The compass spins in circles inside. There are hidden rocks." Captain Rose stared at the wall of fog. Then she looked back at the Obsidian. Iron Hand was getting closer again. The wind was shifting in his favor. Rose made a decision. She turned the wheel. The ship pointed straight at the gray wall. "We are going in?" Jack asked, shocked. "It is our only cover," Rose said calmly. "Better to face the rocks than to face Iron Hand." The wall of fog swallowed the ship. One moment, the sun was shining on Jack's back. The next moment, everything was gray. The air became instantly cold and wet. It felt like walking into a damp cave. Jack stood at the railing. He looked back. The blue sky was gone. The dark shape of the Obsidian was gone. There was only thick, swirling white mist. He could not even see the water below. "Lower the mainsail," Captain Rose ordered. Her voice sounded flat and strange in the fog. "Slow us down." "But Captain," a sailor called out, "if we slow down, Iron Hand will catch us. If we stay fast, we will hit a rock. Rose replied sharply. "We are flying blind. Drop the canvas. Now." The crew obeyed. Jack and Barnaby pulled the ropes. The big white sail came down. The ship lost its speed. It glided silently through the water. The wood stopped creaking. The wind stopped howling. It was suddenly very quiet. Jack wiped the moisture from his face. His coat was covered in tiny droplets of water. He walked to the front of the ship. He tried to see ahead, but it was impossible. He could only see the tip of the bowsprit, the wooden pole at the front. Beyond that, there was nothing but white emptiness. Barnaby stood next to him. The giant man held a long wooden pole. He looked nervous. "Why do they call it the White Maze?" Jack whispered. "Because it tricks you." Barnaby whispered back. "Without the sun or stars, you lose your direction. You think you are going straight, but you are turning in circles. And there are sharp rocks hidden in the water. They wait for ships like teeth." Jack shuddered. He gripped the railing. "Can Iron Hand follow us in here?" "Iron Hand is crazy, but he is not stupid," Barnaby said. "He knows the danger, but he has a bigger ship. He cannot turn as fast as us. If he comes in here, he risks sinking his ship." Captain Rose stood at the wheel. She did not touch it. She closed her eyes. She was listening. Quiet on deck. She hissed, "I need to hear the waves." The crew froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Jack held his breath. He listened to the sound of the ocean. He heard the gentle slap of water against the hull. Suddenly, Rose spun the wheel hard to the left. Hard to port. She whispered urgently. Jack looked to the right. Out of the fog, a dark shape appeared. It was a massive jagged rock, wet and black. It was only 5 meters away. The ship passed it silently. If Rose had not turned, they would have crashed. That was close, Jack thought. His heart beat like a drum against his ribs. They continued deeper into the mist. Time lost its meaning. It could have been minutes or hours. The world was just gray and cold. They were safe from the cannons, but they were trapped in a ghost world. Night fell, but inside the fog, it was hard to tell. The gray mist simply turned into a wall of black ink. It was impossible to see the hand in front of your face. The air was freezing cold. It soaked into Jack's clothes and made him shiver. Captain Rose gave a new order. It was passed from man to man in whispers. Absolute silence. No talking. No shoes on the deck. No lights. The crew obeyed instantly. They knew the danger. Sound traveled very far over the water, especially in the fog. If they made a noise, Iron Hand would hear them. He would fire his cannons at the sound. Jack took off his heavy boots. He walked on the wet wood in his socks. It was slippery and cold, but it was silent. Barnaby did the same. The giant man moved like a ghost. There was no dinner that night. They could not light a fire in the stove because the glow would shine through the fog like a beacon. Jack ate a cold, hard biscuit. It tasted like sawdust, but he ate it slowly. He sat with his back against the main mast. He hugged his knees to stay warm. Hours passed. The silence was heavy. It pressed against Jack's ears. He could hear the breathing of the sailor next to him. He could hear the water dripping from the sails. Suddenly, Jack heard a different sound. He froze. He stopped chewing. Every muscle in his body went tight. It was the sound of a brass bell. It was faint, but it was distinct. It came from the left side of the ship. Jack looked at Barnaby. Barnaby's eyes were wide in the darkness. He heard it too. Then came a voice. It drifted through the fog, distorted and ghostly. "Anything." The voice shouted. "Nothing, sir. Just mist." Another voice answered. Jack's blood turned to ice. It was the crew of the Obsidian. They were incredibly close. Maybe only 200 meters away. They were sailing blind, just like the blue bird, listening for their prey. Captain Rose stood at the wheel. She was perfectly still. She did not breathe. She signaled to her crew to stay down. The enemy ship moved past them. Jack could hear the creaking of their ropes and the heavy splash of their bow cutting the water. He imagined the cannons pointing into the dark. If a sailor on the Blue Bird sneezed now, they would all die. Jack pressed his hand over his mouth. He prayed. The sounds slowly faded. The bell rang again, but it was quieter this time. The voices disappeared. The Obsidian continued forward, missing them in the dark maze. Jack let out a long, slow breath. His heart was beating so hard it hurt. They were safe for the moment. As he relaxed, Jack looked toward the front of the ship. He saw a tiny flash of light. It was very quick, like a firefly. It came from behind a stack of barrels. Jack frowned. No lights were allowed. Who was there? He squinted his eyes. He saw a shadow move quickly away from the barrels. It looked like one of the crew members, but Jack could not see the face. Strange. Jack thought. Why would someone light a spark now? He decided to watch closely. The danger outside the ship was gone, but maybe there was a new danger inside. Jack waited until the shadows on the deck stopped moving. He was sure he saw a light. It was a small spark, but in the pitch-black fog, it was as bright as a star. He stood up silently in his socks. He walked toward the stack of barrels where the shadow had been. His heart beat fast. Was he imagining things? The fear of Iron Hand made everyone nervous. Maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him. He reached the barrels. He looked behind them. There was nobody there. Just my imagination. Jack thought. He turned to leave. Then, he smelled it. It was a faint, sharp smell. Sulfur. The smell of a flint strike used to start a fire. Jack knelt down. He touched the wooden hoop of the barrel. It was cold. He felt around the floor. His fingers touched something small and hard. He picked it up. It was a small piece of black stone. Flint. And next to it, a tiny drop of fresh oil on the deck. Jack's blood ran cold. Someone had tried to light a lantern here. Someone wanted to send a signal to the Obsidian. Jack stood up and walked quickly to the quarterdeck. Barnaby was standing guard near the wheel. He looked like a stone statue in the mist. Barnaby. Jack whispered urgently. The giant looked down. Go to sleep, Jack. I cannot sleep, Jack said. He opened his hand and showed the piece of flint. I saw a light near the water barrels. Someone struck a flint. I found this on the deck. And there is fresh oil. Barnaby frowned. He took the flint. He looked at it closely. A light. Are you sure? Yes. Jack said. It was quick. Like a signal. Barnaby's face grew dark. He turned to Captain Rose. She was awake, leaning against the railing. She had heard everything. I knew it. Rose said softly. Her voice was full of anger, but she did not shout. Captain. Barnaby asked. Think about it. Barnaby. Rose said. She walked over to them. Iron Hand found us at the island too quickly. We changed course 3 times during the storm. How did he know where we were? The ocean is huge. I thought he was just a good hunter. Barnaby said. No hunter is that good. Rose said. He has eyes on my ship. Someone on this crew is telling him where we are. She looked at the sleeping forms of the sailors on the main deck. Her eyes were cold. "We have a traitor. Barnaby. One of our own men is working for Iron Hand." Jack looked at the sailors too. He felt sick. He worked with these men. He ate with them. Patch, the cook, the riggers. One of them was an enemy. "Who is it?" Jack asked. "I do not know." Rose said. "But we will find him. If he signaled once, he will try again. Iron Hand is close. The traitor will want to guide him through the fog." She looked at Jack. "You have sharp eyes. Jack. You saw the light when the watchman did not. I have a job for you." "What is it?" Jack asked. "Go back to your spot." Rose ordered. "Pretend to sleep. But keep your eyes open. Watch the crew. If anyone moves, if anyone touches a lantern, do not stop them. Follow them. I want to catch them red-handed." Jack lay down on the hard wooden deck. He pulled his coat over his head, leaving a small gap to see through. The ship was silent, except for the soft sound of waves and the snoring of exhausted sailors. He waited. His body was tired, but his mind was wide awake. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every creak of the wood sounded like a footstep. An hour passed. Jack's eyes felt heavy. He wanted to sleep. Just as his eyes began to close, he saw movement. 3 hammocks away, a man sat up. He moved very slowly. He looked left, then right. He listened to the breathing of the men around him. Satisfied that everyone was asleep, the man stood up. It was Silas. Jack knew him. Silas was a thin man with yellow teeth and a nasty temper. He was the one who complained most about the food. Silas did not walk toward the bathroom bucket. He walked toward the back railing, away from the other men. He held one hand inside his coat, protecting something. Jack waited for Silas to move a few meters. Then, Jack rolled out of his blanket. He stood up in his socks. He made no sound. He followed Silas, stepping carefully on the dry parts of the deck. Silas stopped at the stern railing. He looked out into the thick black fog. Somewhere out there, the Obsidian was waiting. Silas pulled his hand from his coat. He held a small lantern. It was covered with a thick black cloth so no light could escape. Silas lifted the corner of the cloth. A beam of yellow light shone onto the dark water. He covered it, then uncovered it again. He was sending a code. Jack did not wait. He ran forward. He jumped onto Silas's back. Silas gasped. He dropped the lantern. It hit the deck and rolled. But luckily the glass did not break. The 2 men fell onto the wood. "Get off me!" Silas hissed. He tried to punch Jack. Jack was younger and stronger. He grabbed Silas's wrists and pinned them to the floor. Silas struggled like a snake. He tried to kick Jack, but Jack held him down with his weight. "Traitor!" Jack whispered angrily. "You are signaling them." "Let me go." Silas growled. "You don't know what you are doing." Suddenly, a giant hand grabbed Silas by the neck. It was Barnaby. The quartermaster lifted Silas off the ground with one hand. Silas's feet dangled in the air. "I know exactly what you are doing," Barnaby said. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. "You are selling us to Iron Hand." Captain Rose stepped out of the shadows. She picked up the lantern. She looked at the fresh oil burning inside. Then she looked at Silas. Her eyes were dangerous. "Tie him up," Rose ordered. "Gag him. I do not want him to make a sound. We will deal with him in the morning." Barnaby threw Silas to the deck and tied his hands with thick rope. Silas glared at Jack with hate in his eyes, but he could not speak. Jack stood up and brushed the dirt off his clothes. His heart was racing. He had caught the spy. The sun rose, but inside the white maze, there was no dawn. The black fog simply turned into a dirty, heavy grey. The air was damp and cold. The silence of the night was replaced by the low murmurs of the crew. They stood in a circle on the main deck. Their faces were grim. In the center of the circle, Silas knelt on the hard wood. His hands were tied behind his back. His lip was bleeding from where Barnaby had grabbed him. Captain Rose stood in front of him. She did not look like a captain now. She looked like a judge. She held her pistol in her belt, but her hand rested on the hilt of her sword. "Explain yourself," Rose said. Her voice was calm, but it carried a deadly weight. Silas looked up. He did not look sorry. He looked defiant. "I did what I had to do to survive." He spat. "Survive?" Barnaby growled. He stood next to Rose, looking like an executioner. "You tried to sell us to the butcher. Iron Hand would have killed us all." "He would have killed you." Silas sneered. He looked at the other sailors. "Iron Hand only wants the map. He promised mercy to anyone who helped him. I was trying to save myself. And maybe some of you." The crew shifted uncomfortably. Fear was a powerful thing. Silas was trying to use their fear against the captain. "You are a coward, Silas," Jack said. He stepped forward from the crowd. "You were willing to trade our lives for gold." Silas glared at Jack. "You are just a boy. You don't know Iron Hand. We cannot beat him. This ship is a coffin. Rose is leading you to your deaths for a fairy tale." "Enough!" Rose shouted. The sound cut through the fog like a knife. She stepped closer to Silas. "You signed the ship's articles. You swore loyalty to the crew. The penalty for treason is death." Barnaby pulled a long knife from his belt. "Shall I do it, Captain?" A quick cut. "We cannot use a gun. The noise is too loud." The crew held their breath. Silas's eyes went wide. The defiance vanished, replaced by terror. Rose looked at Silas, then at the grey water swirling around the ship. She shook her head. "No," Rose said. "I will not spill blood on my deck today. It is bad luck to execute a man in the fog." "Then what?" Barnaby asked. "We cannot keep him. He is dangerous." "We will not keep him," Rose said. She pointed to the small wooden rowboat tied at the side of the ship. "We are near the edge of the shallows. There are sandbanks and small rocks nearby. We will give him the boat." "The boat?" Silas asked, confused. "You are letting me go?" Rose smiled, but it was a cold, cruel smile. "I'm giving you a chance. Silas. Iron Hand is out there somewhere in the fog. You love him so much. Go find him. Row through the currents. Row through the sharks. If he finds you, maybe he will reward you. If not, the sea will take you." She turned to Barnaby. "Put him in the boat. Give him 1 bottle of water. Nothing else." "Aye, Captain," Barnaby said. He grabbed Silas by the collar and dragged him toward the railing. Silas began to scream and beg, but the crew turned their backs on him. He had made his choice. Barnaby did not listen to Silas's screams. He lifted the traitor easily over the railing and dropped him into the small wooden boat hanging on the side of the ship. Silas landed with a heavy thud. He scrambled to his knees, his face wet with tears and sweat. "Please, Captain," Silas begged, looking up at Rose. "Iron Hand will not find me in this fog. I will starve. Or the sharks will get me. Then you better start rowing." Rose said coldly. She signaled to Barnaby. Lower him. Barnaby and two other sailors released the ropes. The small boat jerked down toward the black water. It hit the surface with a splash. Barnaby threw a single wooden oar and a bottle of water down to Silas. Good luck. Barnaby grunted. Then he cut the guide rope with his knife. The current in the fog was strong. Immediately, the small boat began to drift away from the Blue Bird. Silas grabbed the oar frantically. He tried to row back toward the ship, but the current was too powerful. Wait. Don't leave me. Silas shouted. His voice echoed strangely in the mist. Jack stood at the railing and watched. The grey fog swirled around Silas. First, the boat became blurry. Then, Silas's figure became just a dark shadow. Finally, the white mist swallowed him completely. He was gone, but they could still hear him. Captain Rose. Jack. Help me. The screams grew fainter and fainter. Then, suddenly, there was a different sound from the water. A splash. Then a panicked yell, cut short by a gurgling noise. Silence returned to the white maze. Jack felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He looked at Patch. The old sailor was making a religious sign on his chest. Shark waters. Patch whispered. They say the sharks in the fog are blind, but they hear a heart beating from a mile away. Captain Rose turned away from the railing. Her face was hard, like stone. She did not show any emotion. She could not afford to be weak. Back to work. She ordered the crew. Silas is gone, but the danger is still here. She looked at Jack. You did well, Jack. You saved this ship. If he had continued to signal, Iron Hand would be on top of us by now. Jack nodded, but he felt sick. He had done the right thing, but watching a man die was not a victory. It was just a grim necessity of this life. We must change course. Rose said to Barnaby. If Silas signaled successfully before he was caught, Iron Hand knows our general location. We need to move into the deep jagged rocks. It is risky, but Iron Hand's ship is too big to follow us there. The Needle Rocks? Barnaby asked, looking worried. That is suicide, Captain. It is our only path. Rose said. Steer hard to starboard. We are leaving the fog. Jack looked back into the grey emptiness one last time. There was no sign of Silas, only the endless, hungry ocean. He realized now that this adventure was not a game. The price of failure was death. He tightened his coat and followed Barnaby to the ropes. He was ready to work. The ship moved slowly out of the thick fog. The grey mist became thinner and lighter. Finally, a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds. It hit the wet deck like a spotlight. Jack blinked. His eyes were used to the dark, and the light hurt for a moment. He looked ahead. His mouth fell open. In front of them, the ocean looked like a field of broken glass. Hundreds of tall, sharp rocks stuck out of the water. They were black and jagged. Some were as tall as a house. Others were just hiding under the surface, ready to tear the bottom of a ship. Welcome to the Needle Rocks, Barnaby said. He stood next to Jack, looking grim. This is the graveyard of ships. We are going through there, Jack asked. He looked at the narrow gaps between the stones. It looks impossible. It is impossible for most captains, Barnaby said. But Captain Rose knows these waters better than anyone, and we have no choice. Captain Rose stood at the wheel. She did not look relaxed. Her eyes scanned the water, looking for the light blue color that meant shallow reefs. She shouted orders to the crew constantly. 2 degrees to port. Slack the mainsail. Watch the current. The crew worked fast. They pulled ropes and adjusted the sails to catch the gentle wind. The Blue Bird was a small, agile ship. It danced between the giant rocks. Sometimes, the black stone was so close that Jack could reach out and touch it. Jack looked back toward the fog bank. The wall of mist was now behind them. Emerging from the grey cloud was a massive dark shape. It was the Obsidian. Iron Hand's ship had followed them to the edge of the fog. It was huge and terrifying. Its black sails were full of wind. But then, it stopped. The big ship turned sideways. It did not enter the field of rocks. "Look!" Jack shouted. "He is stopping." Barnaby laughed. It was a loud, happy sound. "He has to stop. His ship is too heavy. It sits too deep in the water. If he tries to come in here, he will rip his hull open. He is trapped outside." Jack watched the enemy ship. It fired one cannon shot in anger. The ball splashed harmlessly into the water, hundreds of meters away. Iron Hand could not touch them here. "We did it." Jack breathed. He felt a heavy weight lift from his shoulders. "We lost him." Barnaby agreed. "But now we have a new problem. We are in the middle of a maze." Captain Rose called the crew to the deck. She looked tired, but she smiled. "We are safe from Iron Hand for now," she said. "He must sail the long way around the rocks. That gives us 2, maybe 3 days of a head start." She pulled the old map from her coat. "Now, we focus on the treasure. The map says the path to the compass goes through these rocks. We must find the singing stones." "Singing stones?" Jack asked. "You will hear them soon enough," Rose said mysteriously. "Prepare the ship. The real puzzle begins now." Jack looked ahead at the dangerous path. They had escaped the hunter, but now they had to survive the trap. The path through the Needle Rocks became narrower. On both sides of the ship, black stone walls rose high into the sky. They blocked the sun, casting long, dark shadows over the deck. The water was deep and dark. Jack stood at the front of the ship. His job was to watch for hidden rocks under the water. He leaned over the railing, his eyes focused. It was very quiet. The only sound was the gentle splash of water against the hull. Then, the silence broke. Jack heard a strange noise. It was low and soft at first. It sounded like a woman humming a sad song. He looked around. "Who is singing?" Jack asked. Barnaby was standing nearby. He stopped working and listened. "Nobody is singing." "Jack." "I hear it." Jack insisted. "It is coming from ahead." The ship sailed forward. The sound grew louder. It changed from a hum to a clear, musical note. It sounded like a giant flute playing in the distance. Then, another note joined it, and another. Soon, the air was filled with a strange, ghostly music. It was beautiful, but it made Jack feel dizzy. It vibrated in his chest. "It is the rocks," Captain Rose said. She walked to the front of the deck. She looked up at the high stone walls. "Look closely." Jack looked up. He saw hundreds of small holes in the black stone. They were natural tunnels carved by the wind and rain over thousands of years. When the wind blows through the holes, Rose explained, the rocks become musical instruments. This place is called the Singing Rocks. "It is loud," Jack said. He covered his ears with his hands. The sound was now a roar of different notes. It was hard to think. It was hard to hear the orders from the captain. "It is dangerous," Barnaby shouted over the noise. Sailors get confused. They listen to the music and forget to watch the water. Then they crash. Rose pulled out the map. She studied it intensely. We must listen carefully. The map has a riddle. Ignore the high screams. Follow the low drum. The low drum, Jack asked. Listen for the deepest sound. Rose yelled. That is the path to the treasure. The crew tried to focus. The high-pitched whistling sounds were everywhere. They were sharp and painful. But underneath them, there was a deep, rhythmic booming sound. It sounded like a giant heart beating deep inside the rock maze. There. Jack pointed to the left. I hear the drum over there. Rose nodded. She signaled the helmsman. The blue bird turned left, away from the wide, easy path and toward a narrow, dark gap between two massive stones. The high whistling faded away. The deep booming sound got louder. It felt like the ship was sailing into the mouth of a monster. The air grew colder. Keep your eyes open. Rose ordered. We are getting close to the center. Jack gripped the railing. The music of the rocks was guiding them, but he did not know if it was leading them to gold or to their graves. The deep booming sound guided them into a large, circular lagoon. The water here was perfectly still and dark, like a black mirror. High stone walls surrounded the ship on all sides. It looked like the bottom of a giant stone bowl. Drop anchor, Captain Rose ordered. The chain rattled, and the blue bird stopped in the center of the lagoon. The drum sound was very loud here. It came from the base of the cliffs, where the water met the stone. The crew looked around. They were confused. There was no beach. There was no cave entrance. There was only solid rock. Where is it? Barnaby asked. He looked at the empty cliffs. There is no treasure here. Just walls. Captain Rose frowned. She placed the map on a barrel on the deck. The line stops here. She said. We followed the singing rocks. We followed the drum. This must be the place. She looked frustrated. She smoothed the old paper with her hand. Maybe I missed something. Maybe the map is fake. Jack stepped forward. Let me see. Captain. Rose moved aside. Jack looked at the map. He had carried it in his pocket for days, but he had never really studied the writing. He saw the drawing of the island, the line of the ship's path, and the skull symbol. But in the corner, there was a small block of strange text. It looked like nonsense words. Will ATNI school PU? Jack scratched his head. He was not a scholar. He was a dock worker. But he knew about codes. Sometimes, merchants marked crates with backward letters to hide the contents from thieves. It is not a foreign language. Jack said slowly. It is backward. Backward? Rose asked. Look. Jack pointed. Read it from right to left. Up looks in the low. Up looks in the low. Barnaby repeated. That makes no sense. It is a riddle. Jack looked around the lagoon. He looked up at the high cliffs. The sun was shining on the top of the rocks, but the lagoon was in shadow. Then he looked down at the black water. The water was so still that it reflected the cliffs perfectly. Wait. Jack said. He looked at the map again. There was another line of text. H tertet psi retor at. The water is the truth. Jack translated. He ran to the railing. He looked down into the reflection. In the water, he saw the reflection of the cliffs. But then he noticed something strange. On the real cliff wall, there was nothing. But in the reflection on the water, he saw a light. How is that possible? Jack whispered. He looked up again. High up on the cliff face, hidden in a small crack, there was a piece of shiny metal. It was angled so that it only reflected light down into the water, not out toward the ship. You could not see it by looking up. You could only see it by looking down at the reflection. The map tells us not to look up at the rocks. Jack said excitedly. "It tells us to look at the water." He pointed to a specific spot in the water near the south wall. "The reflection point's there. Right there." Rose looked. She saw the glint of light in the dark water. Her eyes widened. "You are right, Jack," she said. "The treasure is not on the island. It is under it." Jack finished. Barnaby looked at the dark water. "You mean we have to swim in there?" "The entrance is underwater," Rose said. She started to take off her heavy coat and boots. "Get the diving gear. We are going down." Barnaby brought 2 long coils of thick rope and 2 heavy stones from the ballast of the ship. He placed them on the deck next to the railing. His face was full of worry. "This is madness, Captain," Barnaby muttered. "You cannot hold your breath long enough to find a cave. The pressure will crush you." Captain Rose tightened her belt. She had removed her heavy coat, her boots, and her weapons. She stood in a simple white shirt and trousers. "The map is clear, Barnaby. The entrance is down there. If we want the compass, we have to get wet." Jack prepared himself too. He felt nervous. He had swum in the harbor many times to cool off after work, but he had never dived into deep, unknown water. The lagoon looked black and bottomless. "Tie the ropes around your waists," Barnaby ordered. He handed one end of a rope to Jack and the other to Rose. "If you run out of air, or if you see trouble, pull the rope 3 times. I will pull you up fast." "Understood," Jack said. He tied the knot tight. "Hold the stones," Rose instructed. "They will pull us down quickly. We do not want to waste energy swimming down. Save your air for the search." Jack picked up the heavy rock. It was cold and rough. He stood on the edge of the ship. He looked down at the spot where the reflection had pointed. The water was still. "Ready?" Rose asked. "Ready," Jack said. They took 3 deep breaths together. In, out, in, out. On the 3rd breath, Jack filled his lungs completely. He stepped off the ship. The water hit him like a frozen hammer. It was incredibly cold. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second, then forced them open. The salt water stung, but he could see. The heavy stone in his arms pulled him down like an anchor. He sank past the hull of the Blue Bird. The water changed from light blue to dark blue. Bubbles rose from his clothes. Jack looked at Rose. She was sinking next to him, her hair floating like a red cloud in the water. She pointed toward the cliff wall. They went deeper. The pressure in Jack's ears began to build. He swallowed hard to clear it. It felt like invisible hands were pressing on his head. Suddenly, the wall of the cliff changed. The natural jagged rock became smooth. Jack squinted in the dim light. He saw a shape in the stone. It was an archway. It was not a natural cave. It was a carved tunnel entrance, perfectly round. The opening was dark and scary. It looked like the mouth of a giant fish waiting to swallow them. Jack looked at Rose. She nodded. She pointed at the tunnel, then pointed up. They had found the entrance, but they needed to breathe before they could go inside. They dropped the heavy stones. The stones fell into the darkness below. Immediately, Jack felt lighter. He kicked his legs hard. He swam up toward the shimmering light of the surface. He burst out of the water, gasping for air. "We found it!" Jack shouted, wiping water from his eyes. "There is a tunnel." Barnaby leaned over the railing. "Is it far?" "Deep," Rose said, taking a big breath. "But we can make it. The tunnel goes into the rock. There must be an air pocket inside." "We go back down," Rose said firmly. This time, we go all the way in." Jack floated in the cold water. He took slow, deep breaths. Beside him, Captain Rose was doing the same. She looked focused and calm. Above them, Barnaby leaned over the ship's railing. "Remember," Barnaby called down, "if you do not pull the rope in 2 minutes, I will pull you up myself, dead or alive." 2 minutes is enough," Rose said. She looked at Jack. "Stay close to me. Do not panic. Panic kills you faster than water. When we enter the tunnel, swim as fast as you can." Jack nodded. He was terrified, but he trusted her. "I am ready." They took one last huge breath. They kicked their legs and dove under the surface. This time, they did not have the heavy stones. They had to swim hard to get down. Jack pushed the water behind him. He followed the red cloud of Rose's hair. The light from the sun faded away as they went deeper. The water turned a dark, murky blue. They reached the stone archway. Up close, it looked ancient. There were strange carvings around the entrance, but algae covered most of them. Rose did not hesitate. She swam straight into the dark hole. Jack followed her. Inside the tunnel, it was pitch black. Jack could not see anything. He reached out and touched the walls. The stone was slimy and cold. He felt like he was swimming inside the throat of a monster. He kicked harder. His lungs began to burn. His body wanted air. The instinct to breathe was strong. "I need to go back," Jack thought. "I cannot make it." Fear seized his heart. He stopped swimming for a second. He turned around, looking for the exit light. Suddenly, a hand grabbed his wrist. It was Rose. She pulled him forward with surprising strength. She would not let him turn back. She squeezed his hand tight, giving him courage. Jack kicked again. The burning in his chest grew worse. It felt like fire. His vision started to get blurry. He knew he only had a few seconds of consciousness left. Then, he saw it. Far ahead, there was a faint blue glow. It was not sunlight. It was something else. But it meant there was an opening. Rose pointed at the light. They swam with their last energy. The tunnel opened up into a larger space. They looked up. There was a surface above them. They kicked frantically toward the top. Jack's head broke the surface. He gasped. The air tasted sweet and damp. He coughed and sputtered, filling his starving lungs with oxygen. We made it." Jack panted. His voice echoed loudly. He looked around. They were in a large underground cavern. The walls were covered in glowing blue mushrooms. They provided a soft, ghostly light. There was a dry rocky shore nearby. Rose swam to the shore and pulled herself out of the water. She lay on the rocks, breathing hard. Jack followed her. He collapsed on the cold stone floor. They were alive, but they were trapped deep inside the island. "Look," Rose whispered, pointing to the back of the cave. Jack looked up. At the end of the cavern, a massive pair of stone doors stood closed, and in front of the doors, something moved in the shadows. Jack stood up slowly. His clothes dripped water onto the cold stones. He squinted into the dim blue light. The large stone doors were about 20 meters away, but between the dry shore where they stood and the doors, there was a wide, dark pool of water. It looked like a moat. "Something is in that water," Jack whispered. Captain Rose stood beside him. She reached for her belt, but then she remembered. She had left her heavy pistol and sword on the ship to make the swim possible. She only had a small knife strapped to her leg. Jack had a similar knife. Against a monster, they were useless. "We have to cross," Rose said. "The doors are the only way forward." She picked up a loose stone from the ground. She threw it into the dark pool. Splash! For a moment, nothing happened. The ripples moved across the black water. Then, the water began to bubble. Suddenly, a massive shape erupted from the surface. It was not a shark. It was something far worse. A long, thick arm, covered in slimy suction cups, shot out of the water. It smashed onto the rocky shore, just inches from Jack's feet. "Run back!" Rose screamed. They scrambled backward, away from the water's edge. The creature rose higher. It was a giant octopus. Its body was a sickly pale color, having lived in the dark for centuries. Its head was the size of a carriage. Its large, yellow eyes stared at them with intelligence and hunger. "It is the Guardian." Rose gasped. The legends said a beast watched the treasure. The octopus lifted 3 more tentacles. They waved in the air like giant snakes. It blocked the path to the stone doors completely. One tentacle reached out and felt the ground, searching for them. It crushed a rock into dust. "We are trapped," Jack said, his voice shaking. "We cannot go forward, and we cannot swim back through the tunnel without air." The octopus let out a low, wet hissing sound. It pulled itself closer to the shore. It could move on land, though slowly. It was cornering them against the cave wall. "Think, Jack," Rose said urgently. "We cannot fight it. Look at the size of it. If it grabs us, we are dead." Jack looked around the cavern. He saw the glowing blue mushrooms on the walls. He saw the piles of old bones near the water, remains of other explorers or animals that had found their way in. The octopus lashed out with a tentacle. Crack! It hit the wall above their heads. Stone fragments rained down on them. "It is blind," Jack realized suddenly. "Look at its eyes. They are cloudy white. It lives in the dark. It hunts by sound and smell." "Are you sure?" Rose asked, dodging another strike. "I am sure," Jack said. "When you threw the stone, it attacked the splash. When we speak, it turns toward us." The octopus roared again, a terrible gurgling noise. It raised 2 tentacles high, ready to smash the spot where they were standing. "We need to make a sound somewhere else," Jack whispered. "We need to distract it." "Listen to me," Jack whispered to Rose. He kept his voice very low. "The beast attacks sound. If we make a loud noise on the left side of the pool, it will move there. Then we run to the right side and reach the doors." Rose looked at the giant monster. Its tentacles were feeling the air, searching for them. "It is a risk," she whispered back. "If you are wrong, we are dead. We have no other choice," Jack said. He looked around the ground. He found a large, heavy rock. It was the size of a cannonball. He picked it up carefully. He did not want to make a sound yet. "On my signal," Jack said. "Wait for the splash. Then run as fast as you can along the wall." Rose nodded. She crouched down, her muscles tense and ready to spring. Jack took a deep breath. He swung his arm back. He used all his strength. He threw the heavy rock high into the air. It flew over the dark pool and landed on the far left side of the water. The sound was loud in the echoey cave. The giant octopus reacted instantly. It let out a screeching roar. Its massive body surged toward the noise. All 8 tentacles lashed out at the ripples in the water. It attacked the empty spot with terrible fury, thinking its prey had fallen in. "Now!" Jack yelled. Jack and Rose broke from the shadows. They ran along the narrow, slippery ledge on the right side of the cavern. They moved fast. Their wet boots slapped against the stone, but the noise of the octopus thrashing in the water was louder. They were halfway to the doors when the octopus stopped. The creature realized it had caught nothing but water. It paused. Then, it heard the sound of footsteps on the stone ledge. It whipped its giant head around. The milky white eyes stared blindly in their direction. "Run!" Rose shouted. A long, slimy tentacle shot out of the water like a whip. It flew toward them. Jack ducked. The tentacle smashed into the wall just above his head. Stone chips rained down on his hair. "Go! Go!" Jack pushed Rose forward. They reached the platform in front of the stone doors. But they were not safe yet. The octopus pulled itself out of the water again. It dragged its heavy body onto the stone platform. It blocked their way back to the water. They were trapped against the doors. "Open the door!" Jack screamed. Rose pushed against the massive stone slabs. "It is locked. There is no handle." The octopus raised two tentacles high in the air. It was ready to crush them flat. Jack looked at the door. In the center, there was a square hole. It was the same size as the stone block Jack had found in the jungle, the one with the compass star. But they didn't have the block. The map. Jack remembered. The shape on the map. Rose looked at the hole. Then she looked at the octopus. The tentacles began to fall. Jack saw a lever hidden in the carvings on the wall next to the door. It was covered in ancient moss. He didn't know what it did, but he grabbed it. "Down!" Jack yelled. He pulled the lever. The lever was stiff and rusted, but Jack pulled it down with all his weight. Deep inside the stone wall, heavy chains began to move. The ground shook. With a grinding noise of stone against stone, the massive doors began to open. They did not open slowly. They split apart quickly, creating a gap in the middle. "In! Now!" Rose shouted. She grabbed Jack's arm and pulled him forward. They dove through the opening, rolling onto the dusty floor on the other side. Behind them, the giant octopus struck. Its heavy tentacle smashed down. But it was too late. It hit the thick stone door just as it slammed shut. The impact shook the entire room. Dust fell from the ceiling. Jack heard the muffled roar of the beast on the other side, scratching at the stone. But the doors were locked tight. The monster could not get in. Jack lay on his back, breathing hard. His heart felt like it was going to explode. "We are alive," he whispered. "Stand up, Jack," Rose said softly. Her voice was full of awe. "Look." Jack stood up and brushed the dust from his wet clothes. He looked around. They were in a small, circular room. It was not a natural cave. The walls were smooth and carved with pictures of ships and stars. The ceiling was high and domed. In the center of the ceiling, a large crystal caught a beam of light from somewhere far above, illuminating the room with a pale, golden glow. In the exact center of the room stood a marble pedestal, and on the pedestal sat a small box. It was not a large treasure chest filled with coins. It was a simple box made of dark, polished wood, bound with gold bands. It looked ancient and important. Rose walked toward it slowly. Her steps echoed in the silent room. She reached out a trembling hand. "This is it," she whispered. "The prize that Elias died for." She undid the golden latch. She lifted the heavy wooden lid. Jack stepped closer to look. Inside the box, resting on dark velvet, was a compass. It was made of pure gold. It was beautiful, with intricate engravings of sea monsters and storms on the casing. But the face of the compass was the most amazing part. It did not have the standard directions: north, south, east, west. Instead, the face was blank, like a mirror, and the needle was not made of metal. It was a sliver of floating blue light, spinning gently in the center. "It is beautiful," Jack said. "But it is broken. The needle is just spinning." "It is not broken," Rose said. She reached down and picked up the heavy gold object. As soon as her skin touched the metal, the blue needle stopped spinning. It snapped into a fixed position, pointing straight at the wall. "It is waiting for a command," Rose said. Her eyes reflected the blue light. "This is not a tool for navigation, Jack. It is a tool for desire." Captain Rose held the golden box in her hands. The blue light of the needle cast a ghostly glow on her face. She looked mesmerized. "How does it work?" Jack asked. He was afraid to touch it. "Is it magic?" "It is ancient technology," Rose whispered. "My father told me stories about it. He said the needle connects to your thoughts. If you concentrate on the thing you want most in the world, the needle will point to it." "Anything?" Jack asked. "Anything," Rose confirmed. "Gold, a lost person, a secret island, or an enemy ship." She looked at Jack. Her face was serious. "That is why Iron Hand wants it. With this compass, he can find any ship on the ocean. He can find the Royal Navy and destroy them. He can find every hidden treasure in the world. He would be the king of the sea." Jack felt a cold chill. The small golden object was more dangerous than a cannon. "Let's test it," Rose said. She closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. "I want to find the exit." She opened her eyes. The floating blue needle spun around once. Then it stopped. It pointed firmly to the back of the room, toward a dark section of the stone wall. "There is no door there," Jack said. "The compass says there is," Rose replied confidently. She walked to the wall. She ran her hands over the smooth stone. She pressed and pulled. Suddenly, a hidden mechanism clicked. A section of the wall swung inward. Behind it was a narrow, spiral staircase carved into the rock. It went up into the darkness. "It works," Jack breathed. "It really works." "Here," Rose said. She handed the heavy compass to Jack. "You carry it. I need my hands free to climb. Do not drop it." Jack took the compass. It felt warm in his hands. He felt a strange buzzing sensation in his fingers. He looked at the needle. It was spinning again because Jack was not focusing on a specific desire. "What do you want, Jack?" Rose asked from the stairs. "Don't think about gold. Think about what you really need." Jack closed his eyes. He thought about safety. He thought about fresh air and the sky. He thought about the blue bird. He opened his eyes. The needle pointed up the stairs. "It points to the ship," Jack said. "Good," Rose said. "Then we climb. We have been down here too long. Barnaby will think we drowned." They began to climb the spiral stairs. The air was stale and dusty. The climb was long and tiring. Jack's legs burned, but he held the gold box tight against his chest. It was the key to their freedom, but it was also a heavy burden. After 20 minutes of climbing, they saw daylight. A wooden grate covered the top of the shaft. Jack pushed it open. They climbed out. They were back in the jungle, high on a cliff overlooking the lagoon. The fresh air smelled wonderful. Jack looked down at the water. The blue bird was still there. But then he saw something else. "Captain!" Jack shouted. "Look!" Rose looked. Her face went pale. Another ship had entered the lagoon. It was black. It had a red skull on the flag. The obsidian was anchoring right next to the blue bird. Jack stood frozen on the cliff edge. The warm sun felt cold on his skin. Below them, In the peaceful lagoon, a nightmare was unfolding. The obsidian was massive compared to the blue bird. It looked like a wolf standing over a rabbit. Jack could see figures on the deck of his ship. They were not his friends. They wore black coats. Barnaby. Jack whispered. He squinted. He saw the giant quartermaster and the rest of the crew. They were kneeling on the deck. Their hands were tied behind their backs. Iron Hand's men stood over them with drawn swords. "How did he find us?" Jack asked, his voice shaking. "We lost him in the singing rocks." Captain Rose stared at the scene. Her hands were clenched into fists. "He followed the music, just like we did. Or he knew the way all along. He waited for us to do the hard work. He waited for us to open the door." She turned to Jack. "We cannot go down there. If we go to the beach, they will take the compass. We have to hide in the jungle." "Hide?" Jack asked. "For how long?" "Until we find a way to save my crew," Rose said firmly. "But first, we must protect the treasure. Come on." She pushed Jack toward the thick trees. They ran away from the cliff edge. They moved quickly through the ferns and vines. Jack held the golden box tight against his chest. It was heavy, and it made running difficult. They ran for 5 minutes. They reached a small clearing with tall grass. "Stop," Rose whispered. She held up her hand. Jack stopped. He listened. The jungle was quiet. Too quiet. The birds were not singing. The monkeys were not chattering. "Something is wrong," Rose hissed. Suddenly, the bushes around them shook. Men stepped out from behind the trees. There were 10 of them. They held muskets and heavy swords. They wore the black and red colors of Iron Hand's crew. Leading them was a man Jack recognized. It was the bald pirate with the skull tattoo on his neck, the man from the tavern in Oak Haven. The pirate smiled. It was a cruel, ugly smile. "Hello again, boy," the bald pirate said. He pointed his sword at Jack. "I told you we would find you." Rose reached for the knife on her leg, but 3 muskets were pointed straight at her chest. "Do not do it, Captain," the pirate warned. "We have orders to take you alive, but accidents happen." Rose froze. She slowly moved her hand away from the knife. She looked at Jack. Her eyes said, "I am sorry." The bald pirate stepped closer. He looked at the wooden box in Jack's arms. His eyes shined with greed. "And look at that," the pirate said softly. "The prize. Captain Ironhand will be very pleased." Jack stepped back. He bumped into a tree. He was surrounded. There was nowhere to run. The jungle, which had been their escape route, was now a cage. The bald pirate nodded to 2 of his men. They rushed toward Jack and Rose. "Do not fight," Rose commanded Jack in a low voice. "We need to stay alive. We have the map in our heads." The men grabbed Jack's arms roughly. Jack struggled for a moment, but he was outnumbered and they were stronger. They took the golden compass box from his hands. The bald pirate took the box. He held it up to the sun. He looked at it with a mixture of awe and greed. "It is real," he whispered. "The rumors are true. We are rich." He placed the box carefully into a leather bag at his side. He then turned his attention to Rose. "Captain Ironhand wants to speak with you." Pirate to pirate. "He admires your ship. He wants to know how you lost us in the fog." He pointed his sword at her back. "Move. Walk toward the lagoon." Jack and Rose were forced to walk ahead of the pirates. Their hands were tied tightly behind their backs with rough rope. The rope cut into Jack's wrists. They were led back to the high cliff overlooking the lagoon. The blue bird sat next to the obsidian. The black ship looked like a war machine, ready for battle. A small wooden boat waited at the base of the cliff. They were forced down the steep, narrow path. It was dangerous to walk with their hands tied, but the pirates pushed them forward with the points of their swords. They reached the water. They were pushed into the small boat. The bald pirate, 2 guards, Jack, and Rose rowed across the still lagoon toward the obsidian. When they reached the black ship, Jack was shocked by its size. The sides rose high above them, black wood and heavy iron. They were hauled up onto the deck with thick ropes. Iron Hand's deck was nothing like the Blue Bird. It was messy, crowded, and loud. Hardened, ugly men wearing black and red clothes moved everywhere. They all carried weapons. At the front of the ship, a large man stood by the wheel. He was taller than Barnaby, and his body was thick and powerful. He wore a long, dark red coat. His face was scarred, and he had dark, cruel eyes. On his right arm, where his hand should have been, was a monstrous object, a hand made of shiny, dark metal. It looked heavy and terrifying. "Captain Rose," Iron Hand said. His voice was a low, menacing rumble. He did not move. He just stared at them. "You led me on a merry chase. You are a good sailor. A shame you chose the losing side." He nodded at the bald pirate, who handed him the leather bag. Iron Hand pulled out the golden compass. He held it carefully in his iron hand. "This little prize is worth more than all your small lives combined," Iron Hand said, looking at the compass, not at them. "And thanks to you, it is mine." He looked up at Jack. "As for you, boy, I remember your face from the tavern. You killed 3 of my men. You have earned a special punishment." He gestured to a large wooden cage hanging from the main mast. "Put the girl in the brig. Put the boy in the cage. He can watch the sunset from high above." The iron hand of Captain Iron Hand was silent and brutal. It looked like a tool, but it moved with frightening speed. Jack was separated from Rose immediately. She was dragged below deck toward the brig, the ship's prison. Jack was hauled to the main mast. The small wooden cage hung from a thick rope, high above the deck. It was meant for punishment, not for keeping prisoners. 2 sailors pushed Jack toward the cage. They cut the ropes on his wrists, but only to tie new, stronger ropes around his ankles. They opened the narrow wooden door and shoved him inside. The cage was barely large enough for Jack to sit down. The wood was rough and smelled of stale seawater and old blood. The door was locked with a heavy iron chain. The sailors used a crank to hoist the cage high into the air. Up, up, up Jack went, until he was level with the top sail. The cage swung back and forth with the rocking of the ship. Jack gripped the bars. He felt dizzy and sick. From this height, he could see the entire lagoon. He looked down at the obsidian. The deck was far below, swarming with Iron Hand's men. He looked across the water at the Blue Bird. She looked small and defeated. Iron Hand's men were busy looting her cargo, laughing as they pulled barrels and boxes onto their own ship. Jack felt a deep sadness for the loss of their freedom and their supplies. "Enjoy the view, little hero," the bald pirate shouted from the deck. "You saved your map only to deliver it to the true master of the sea." Jack ignored him. He looked at Captain Iron Hand. The pirate captain stood proudly on the quarterdeck. He was holding the golden compass, studying it under the afternoon sun. He was magnificent and terrifying, like a dark king. Jack knew he had failed Elias and Rose. They had gone through the storm, the fog, and the monster, only to lose everything in the end. He was a captive, suspended in a wooden box, helpless. He sat down on the floor of the cage. The wood felt cold. He looked at the vast, blue ocean beyond the lagoon. They were trapped. Suddenly, a small noise came from below. Jack looked down at the main deck. He saw Barnaby. The quartermaster was still kneeling with the other crew members, but he was moving his hands. He was trying to untie his ropes. Barnaby saw Jack looking, and his eyes flicked upward. He gave Jack a tiny, almost invisible nod. Hope, small and fierce, sparked in Jack's chest. They were still alive. They were still together. The fight was not over. The sun went down, and the sky turned a dark, starry blue. On the deck of the Obsidian, the mood was festive. Captain Ironhand gave his men barrels of rum to celebrate their victory. The pirates drank, ate the stolen food from the Blue Bird, and sang loud, ugly songs. They were drunk on alcohol and success. High above them, Jack sat in his wooden cage. The wind was cold at this height. He shivered in his thin shirt. He watched the party below. The pirates were so confident that they did not pay attention to the prisoners. They thought the crew of the Blue Bird was broken and helpless. That was their mistake. On the main deck, near the pile of ropes, the prisoners sat in a circle. A single guard was supposed to watch them, but he was drinking from a large bottle. His eyes were heavy. Soon, his head dropped to his chest, and he began to snore. Jack watched Barnaby. The giant quartermaster moved his leg slowly. He stretched it out. He reached down with his tied hands. It looked like he was scratching an itch on his ankle. But Jack knew better. Barnaby was reaching into his heavy leather boot. A moment later, a small flash of silver appeared in Barnaby's hand. It was a knife. It was small, but it was sharp. Barnaby had hidden it well. Barnaby worked quickly. He sawed at the thick ropes binding his wrists. It took a few minutes. Jack held his breath. If a pirate saw the knife, they would kill Barnaby instantly. Finally, the ropes fell to the deck. Barnaby was free. He did not stand up. He stayed seated to avoid suspicion. He moved to the sailor next to him. Patch. Barnaby cut Patch's ropes, then passed the knife to him. One by one, quietly and carefully, the crew of the Blue Bird cut their bonds. They kept their hands behind their backs, pretending to still be tied. Barnaby looked up at the mast. He made eye contact with Jack. He pointed to the rope ladder that led up to the crow's nest. The giant man stood up. He moved into the deep shadows cast by the sails. He began to climb. For a man of his size, he was incredibly quiet. He moved like a large spider. The pirates below were too busy singing to look up. Barnaby reached the cage. He balanced on the yardarm. His face was grim. Quiet. Barnaby whispered. He gripped the iron lock on the cage door. "Can you pick it?" Jack asked softly. "No time for picking." Barnaby grunted. "I will break it." He jammed the tip of his knife into the lock mechanism and twisted hard. He used his immense strength. There was a sharp metallic snap. The lock broke. Barnaby pulled the door open. "Let's go, Jack. We have a captain to save." Jack stepped out of the cramped wooden cage. His legs were stiff, and his ankles hurt where the ropes had been. He stood on the narrow wooden beam of the mast, hundreds of feet above the deck. The wind pulled at his clothes. He looked down. The pirates below were small dots, drinking and laughing. "We cannot just climb down," Barnaby whispered. He held onto the thick mast with one arm. "They will see us. We need a distraction. A big one." Jack looked around. Hanging from a hook on the mast, just a few meters below them, was a large iron lantern. It burned with a bright yellow flame, lighting up the upper sails. Directly below the lantern, on the main deck, sat the open barrels of rum that Ironhand had given his crew. The wood of the deck was soaked in spilled alcohol. Jack looked at Barnaby. He pointed at the lantern, then at the rum barrels below. Barnaby smiled. It was a dangerous smile. Perfect. Barnaby handed Jack the knife. Cut the rope. Jack climbed down a few steps on the rope ladder. He reached out and grabbed the heavy rope holding the lantern. He sawed at it with the sharp blade. The rope frayed and then snapped. The heavy iron lantern fell. It dropped straight down like a stone. Jack watched it fall. It hit the deck right in the middle of the drinking pirates. The glass shattered. The burning oil from the lantern mixed with the spilled rum and the open barrels. Whoosh! A massive wall of fire erupted on the deck. It was blue and orange and incredibly hot. The pirates screamed. They scrambled away from the flames, dropping their cups and weapons. Fire! Fire on the deck! The confusion was instant. The drunk pirates ran into each other. They tried to throw water on the flames, but the alcohol made the fire burn hotter. Now! Barnaby yelled. He grabbed a long rope that hung down to the deck. He wrapped his legs around it and slid down. Jack grabbed another rope and followed him. The friction burned his hands, but he did not let go. They slid down past the sails, through the smoke, and landed on the deck. The deck was a scene of madness. Smoke filled the air, stinging Jack's eyes. The pirates were too busy fighting the fire to notice two prisoners landing behind them. Jack looked for the rest of his crew. Near the front of the ship, Patch and the others stood up. They were no longer pretending to be tied. They grabbed discarded swords and belaying pins. For Captain Rose. Patch shouted. The crew of the Blue Bird charged into the confused pirates. They fought with the anger of men who had lost their ship. Jack! Barnaby grabbed his shoulder. Forget the fight. Find the captain. She is in the brig. Jack nodded. He ducked under a swinging sword and ran toward the hatch that led below deck. The fire was spreading, and the smoke was getting thicker. He had to get Rose out before the ship became a burning tomb. Jack ran down the wooden stairs into the belly of the ship. The smoke followed him, thick and grey. It made his eyes water and his throat burn. Captain! Jack shouted. Rose! He reached the brig. The iron bars were thick. Behind them, Captain Rose stood gripping the metal. Her face was dirty with soot, but her eyes were bright and fierce. Jack! She said, surprised. How are you free? Barnaby. Jack gasped. He looked for the keys. They were hanging on a hook on the wall. The guard had run up to the deck to fight the fire. Jack grabbed the heavy iron keys. His hands shook, but he found the right one. He turned it in the lock. Click. The door swung open. Rose stepped out. She did not waste time with hugs or thanks. She grabbed a sword that was left on a table by the guard. She tested the weight of the blade. Good. She said. Now we take back what is ours. They ran back up the stairs. The heat grew more intense with every step. When they burst onto the main deck, it looked like hell. The fire was roaring near the mast. Pirates and sailors were fighting everywhere. Swords clashed, and men shouted in anger. Suddenly, a large shadow blocked their path. Captain Iron Hand stood in front of them. The firelight danced on his red coat and his cruel face. He did not look worried about the burning ship. He looked focused on one thing. Jack. You. Iron Hand growled. He pointed his sword at Jack. You are a pest. I should have killed you in Oak Haven. He stepped forward. He ignored Rose completely. He wanted to punish the boy who had caused so much trouble. Jack raised the sword he had picked up. It felt heavy and clumsy in his hand. He was a dock worker, not a soldier. He knew how to lift crates, not how to fence. Iron Hand attacked. He swung his sword with terrifying power. Jack raised his blade just in time to block it. The impact vibrated through his arms. Jack stumbled back. Weak. Iron Hand laughed. He swung again. Jack ducked. The blade sliced through the air where his head had been a second ago. Jack scrambled away, trying to keep his distance. Jack! Move! Rose shouted. She tried to step in, but two of Iron Hand's crewmen attacked her, forcing her to fight them off. Jack was alone against the Pirate King. Iron Hand lunged. Jack parried the strike, but Iron Hand was fast. He used his other arm, the one with the iron hand. He backhanded Jack across the face. The metal hand hit Jack's jaw like a hammer. Jack saw stars. He fell to the deck hard. His sword slid away from his hand. Iron Hand stood over him. He placed a heavy boot on Jack's chest, pinning him down. He raised his sharp sword for the final blow. Goodbye, boy. Iron Hand sneered. Say hello to the sharks for me. Jack closed his eyes. He waited for the cold steel of the sword. He waited for the end. A loud explosion tore through the air. It was not the sound of the fire. It was the sharp, cracking sound of a pistol shot. Iron Hand screamed in pain. The heavy sword fell from his hand and clattered onto the wooden deck. He stumbled backward, clutching his right shoulder. Blood began to stain his red coat. Jack opened his eyes. He looked past Iron Hand. Captain Rose stood 5 meters away. She held a smoking pistol in her hand. The two pirates she was fighting lay on the deck, unconscious. She had defeated them and saved Jack in the same second. Get up, Jack! Rose shouted. Her voice was fierce. Get up and fight. Jack did not waste a second. He rolled out from under Iron Hand's heavy boot. He grabbed his fallen sword and scrambled to his feet. He stood next to Rose. They shoulder to shoulder, facing the Pirate King. Iron Hand's face was twisted with rage. He looked at his bleeding shoulder, then at Rose. You will pay for that. Iron Hand roared. He tried to pick up his sword with his left hand, the iron hand. The metal fingers clamped around the hilt, but the movement was clumsy. He was not a swordsman with his left hand. He was a bludgeon. It is over, Iron Hand, Rose said calmly. She threw the empty pistol aside and raised her own sword. Your ship is burning. Your men are losing. Surrender. Iron Hand looked around. The fire from the lantern had spread to the sails. The deck was chaos. Barnaby and the crew of the Blue Bird were winning. They were fighting with the strength of free men, while Iron Hand's crew fought only for money. Iron Hand laughed. It was a wet, broken sound. Surrender. I am Captain Iron Hand. I do not surrender to a woman and a dock boy. He backed away toward the railing. He reached into his coat with his metal hand. He pulled out the golden box. You think you have one? Iron Hand shouted over the noise of the fire. I still have the prize. I have the compass. With this, I can control the ocean. I can call the storms. I can destroy you all. He held the box high in the air. The firelight reflected off the gold. Do not touch it. Rose warned. She took a step forward. You do not understand how it works. It is not a weapon. It is power. Iron Hand yelled. And power belongs to the strong. He fumbled with the latch. His metal fingers were slippery with blood and sweat. He tore the lid open. The blue light from the compass needle shined brightly in the night, illuminating his crazy eyes. Show me. Iron Hand commanded the compass. Show me the way to absolute power. He placed his human hand, the hand covered in blood, onto the face of the compass. The moment Iron Hand's hand touched the golden face of the compass, the world seemed to stop. The noises of the battle, the shouting men, The clashing swords, the roaring fire, faded away. Iron Hand stood frozen near the railing. His hand was pressed against the glass. He expected a map. He expected a line of light pointing to a throne or a mountain of gold. "Show me," he demanded again. The blue needle inside the compass began to spin. It spun faster and faster, until it was just a blur of light. Then, suddenly, it stopped. It did not point north, south, east, or west. The needle pointed straight down. It pointed through the wooden floor of the ship, through the water, down into the deep, black abyss of the ocean floor. Iron Hand looked into the face of the compass. It was no longer a mirror reflecting his face. The glass turned dark. "What is this?" Iron Hand whispered. His voice trembled. He saw images in the glass. He did not see himself as a king. He saw a broken ship at the bottom of the sea. He saw bones in the sand. He saw silence. He saw the one thing he feared more than anything else: death. He saw that he was not a ruler, but just another small man who would be forgotten by the waves. "No!" Iron Hand screamed. He tried to pull his hand away, but it was stuck. The compass held him. The cold from the gold spread up his arm. It went into his heart. "Stop it!" he yelled. "I do not want this. The compass shows the truth." Rose shouted over the wind. "You want power because you are afraid. You are afraid of being weak. The compass is showing you your end." Iron Hand's eyes were wide with terror. He looked at the black water below the railing. The compass was pulling him toward it. The needle wanted him to go down. "Get away from me!" Iron Hand shrieked. With a burst of desperate strength, he ripped his hand away from the box. He threw the compass. He didn't aim. He just wanted the cursed object away from him. The golden box flew through the air. It spun over the burning deck. It was heading straight for the open ocean. The compass! Rose cried out. If it fell into the water, it would be lost forever. Jack did not think. He dropped his sword. He ran across the slippery, burning deck. He jumped. He stretched his body out in the air. His fingers brushed the cold gold. He grabbed the edge of the box just before it cleared the railing. He slammed into the wood, his chest hitting the rail hard. He gasped for breath, dangling half over the water. But he had it. The compass was safe in his hand. He pulled himself back onto the deck. He looked up. Iron Hand was backing away, shaking, his face pale as a ghost. The Pirate King was broken. Iron Hand fell to his knees on the burning deck. He did not look at Jack or Rose. He looked at his own hands, one flesh, one iron. He was shaking violently. The vision from the compass had destroyed his spirit. The man who feared nothing was now paralyzed by the fear of his own death. "It is dark," Iron Hand whispered. "So cold, so dark." The battle on the deck slowly stopped. The pirates of the Obsidian looked at their captain. They had never seen him weak. They followed him because he was strong, because he was a monster who could not be beaten. But now, he looked like a frightened child. "He is broken," Barnaby said. He walked through the smoke, his chest heaving. He stood over Iron Hand. The giant quartermaster looked like a warrior of old, covered in soot and sweat. Barnaby looked at the other pirates. "Your captain is finished," he roared. "Drop your weapons, or you will join him in the fire." The bald pirate, the one who had captured Jack, hesitated. He looked at Iron Hand, then at Barnaby's heavy sword. He looked at the fire consuming the mainsail. He knew the fight was lost. The bald pirate dropped his sword onto the deck. He raised his hands. "I surrender," he said. One by one, the other pirates followed him, the sound of metal hitting wood echoed across the ship. The crew of the Obsidian gave up. "Tie them up," Patch shouted to the crew of the Blue Bird. "Quickly!" While the crew secured the prisoners, Captain Rose walked over to Iron Hand. She did not look happy. She looked tired. She looked at the man who had hunted them across the ocean. "You wanted to own the sea," Rose said softly. "But the sea owns us all." Iron Hand did not answer. He just stared at the floor. "Barnaby," Rose ordered. "Take him. We are leaving this ship. It is going to sink." "What about the prisoners?" Barnaby asked. "Leave them the lifeboats," Rose said. "We are not murderers. But we are taking our ship back." Jack walked over to Rose. He still held the golden box tight in his hands. He felt a wave of relief wash over him. His legs felt weak, but this time, he did not fall. "We did it," Jack said. He couldn't believe it. "We actually won." Rose smiled at him. It was a genuine, warm smile. She put a hand on his shoulder. "You did it, Jack. You saved the compass. You saved us." The fire was getting worse. The heat was intense. The main mast of the Obsidian groaned as the flames ate through the wood. "Everyone back to the Blue Bird," Rose shouted. "Move before the mast falls." The crew cheered. They grabbed Iron Hand and dragged him with them. They jumped from the burning railing of the black ship onto the familiar, clean deck of the Blue Bird. They were back on their own territory. Jack was the last one to leave. He looked back at the burning enemy ship one last time. The fire was a beacon in the night, a sign that the reign of Captain Iron Hand was over. He turned and jumped across the gap. He landed on the Blue Bird, safe and victorious. The Blue Bird sailed out of the lagoon and back into the open sea. Behind them, the fire on the Obsidian burned brightly. It lit up the dark cliffs of the Singing Rocks. Finally, with a loud groaning noise, the burning ship tilted and sank beneath the black water. The reign of Captain Iron Hand was over. Jack stood on the quarterdeck with Captain Rose. The cool night wind felt good on his face. The smoke and the heat were gone. In his hands, Jack still held the golden box. "Come with me," Rose said quietly. She led him into her cabin. It was quiet there. She lit a lantern and sat at her desk. She pointed to the empty space on the table. "Put it down." Jack placed the golden compass on the wood. It sat there, shining and innocent. It did not look like a weapon that could destroy a man's mind. "What do we do with it?" Jack asked. "Do we sell it? We could be the richest people in the world." Rose looked at the compass. She shook her head. "Iron Hand wanted it for power. Others will want it for money. But you saw what it did. It shows you your deepest desire, but it also shows your deepest fear. It traps you." She looked at Jack. "Touch it, Jack. One last time. Tell me what you see." Jack hesitated. He remembered Iron Hand's screaming face. But he trusted Rose. He placed his hand on the cold glass face of the compass. The blue needle spun. It moved gently, like a leaf in the wind. Then it stopped. Jack looked into the glass. He did not see a mountain of gold coins. He did not see a palace. He did not see himself as a king. He saw a ship sailing on a blue ocean. He saw Barnaby laughing. He saw Patch tying a rope. He saw Rose at the wheel. And he saw himself, standing on the deck, strong and free. "I see this," Jack whispered. "I see the ship. I see the crew." He took his hand away. "I do not need the compass to find that. I already have it." Rose smiled. "Exactly. Iron Hand was empty inside, so the compass showed him death. But you, Jack, you have found your place. She closed the heavy wooden lid of the box. She locked the golden latch. We will not use it. Rose decided. We will not let it rule us. We will keep it safe, hidden in the bottom of the ship. Maybe one day, if we are lost and truly desperate, we will ask it for help. But for now, we sail by the stars. And the gold? Jack asked. We are still poor. Rose laughed. She stood up and opened the cabin door. She pointed to the main deck. Barnaby was opening a cask of fresh water. The crew was sharing bread and cheering. They were alive. They were together. Look at them. Rose said, we have a fast ship. We have a loyal crew. We have our freedom. That is the real treasure. Jack, gold is just metal. Freedom is life. Jack looked at his friends. He realized she was right. He had left Oak Haven with nothing. Now, he had a family. 3 weeks passed since the battle at the Singing Rocks. The journey back was calm. The sea was gentle, as if it was apologizing for the storms and the monsters. The Blue Bird stopped briefly at a large port city controlled by the Royal Navy. Captain Rose had a promise to keep. Barnaby brought Captain Iron Hand up from the brig. The once terrifying pirate captain looked old and tired. He did not speak. He did not fight. The vision from the compass had taken all his fire away. 2 Navy officers took Iron Hand in chains. They marched him away to a prison cell. He would never hurt anyone again. It is done. Rose said, watching him leave. The ocean is safer now. A few days later, the familiar coastline of Oak Haven appeared on the horizon. Jack stood at the railing. He watched the town grow larger. He saw the busy docks where he used to work. He saw the smoke rising from the chimneys of the houses. He saw the roof of the Rusty Anchor Tavern. It looked exactly the same as the night he left. But Jack felt completely different. He looked at his hands. They were brown from the sun and covered in calluses. They were strong hands, capable of tying knots, fighting pirates, and steering a ship. He touched his face. He had a short beard now. He was not the scared boy running in the rain anymore. Barnaby walked up and stood next to him. The giant quartermaster was eating an apple. Well, Jack, Barnaby said, there is your home. Oak Haven. You have a story to tell them. You can buy drinks for everyone in the tavern. You will be a hero. Jack looked at the busy streets. He imagined going back to carrying crates for Mr. Grin. He imagined sleeping in a solid bed every night. It sounded safe. It sounded boring. I don't think I have a home there anymore. Jack said slowly. Barnaby raised an eyebrow. Oh. The life of a sailor is hard. Jack. You know that. Bad food, storms, wet clothes. I know. Jack smiled. But the air is fresh. And the horizon is always changing. Captain Rose came down from the quarterdeck. She looked at the 2 men. We are docking for supplies. She said, we need water, flour, and gunpowder. We will stay for 2 days. She looked at Jack. This is your stop. Jack. You signed on to escape the pirates. You are safe now. You are free to go. Jack looked at the gangplank connecting the ship to the dock. He could walk down it and never look back. He could have a normal life. He looked at Patch, who was fixing a sail. He looked at the cook, who was peeling potatoes. He looked at Rose and Barnaby. I am already home. Jack said firmly, I want to stay. If you will have me. Rose smiled. It was the smile of a proud teacher. Are you sure? There is no treasure next time. Just hard work. I am sure. Jack said. Good. Rose said. She threw a coil of rope at him. Then get to work, sailor. Those barrels won't load themselves. Jack caught the rope. He felt a surge of happiness. He belonged here. Jack walked down the wooden gangplank and stepped onto the docks of Oakhaven. The ground felt solid and unmoving under his boots. It felt strange. After weeks on the ocean, the land felt dead. He walked through the busy crowds. He saw merchants shouting at workers. He saw beggars sitting in the mud. He saw the grey stone buildings that used to look so big. Now, they looked like small cages. Hey! You! Move it! A harsh voice shouted. Jack turned around. It was Mr. Grin, his old boss. The fat man was yelling at a skinny, frightened boy who had dropped a crate of apples. The boy was trembling, just like Jack used to do. I am sorry, sir. The boy cried. It is heavy. Pick it up, or no dinner. Mr. Grin raised his hand to strike the boy. Jack stepped forward. He caught Mr. Grin's wrist. His grip was like iron. Mr. Grin looked up, shocked. He stared at the tall, tan sailor with the short beard and the dangerous eyes. He did not recognize Jack at first. Do not touch him. Jack said calmly. Who do you think you are? Mr. Grin sputtered. Then, he looked closer. His eyes went wide. Jack! Is that you? The dock rat. Jack let go of Mr. Grin's arm. He looked at the skinny boy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a gold coin, his share of the small loot they had taken from Ironhand's ship. He flipped it to the boy. Here. Jack said. Leave this place. Go find a ship. The world is bigger than these docks. The boy looked at the gold, then at Jack. His eyes shined. He ran away before Mr. Grin could stop him. Mr. Grin was speechless. Jack didn't say another word. He turned his back on his old master and walked away. He had nothing left to say to Oakhaven. His ghost was gone. He returned to the Blue Bird. The supplies were loaded. The water barrels were full. The crew was ready. Ready to cast off. Barnaby shouted. Jack jumped onto the deck. He climbed the rope ladder to the main mast with easy, practiced movements. He stood high above the deck, looking out at the harbor. Captain Rose stood at the wheel. She looked up at him and nodded. Raise the anchor. She ordered. Set the mainsail. The heavy anchor chain rattled. The white sails dropped and caught the wind. The Blue Bird began to move. The water churned white at the stern. As they pulled away from the land, Jack looked at the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in purple and gold. Somewhere out there were new islands, new storms, new monsters, and maybe new treasures. He touched the wooden planks of the mast. Deep below the deck, hidden in a secret compartment, the golden compass sat in its box. It was sleeping. They didn't need it. They had the stars to guide them, and they had each other. Barnaby walked to the bow of the ship. He took a deep breath of salt air and roared with laughter. Where to, Captain? Rose spun the wheel toward the open ocean. Anywhere. Barnaby. Everywhere. Jack smiled. The wind filled the sails, pushing them forward into the unknown. He was Jack the sailor. He was a pirate. He was free.